Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku had faced his demons part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story mochiwrites from 𝗧𝗵𝗲. So let's start the video. 𝗵𝘃𝗃𝗀𝗁𝗏 smiles down at the small bundle in her arms, rocking the baby back and forth. She hums quietly as she plants a kiss on his forehead. The baby giggles in reply, reaching out to his mother when she pulls back. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 lets out a light laugh at this and holds out a finger for him to grab onto. The baby in her arms reaches for her finger without hesitation, smiling up at her. Two arms wrap around her from behind and 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 looks up to see black curls and freckles. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟, she says joyfully. Her husband smiles in response. Someone seems extra happy today, he notes as he looks down at the baby. He gets a gurgle in response. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 giggles. He's been full of energy since I woke him up from his nap, she explains. I see. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟 pulls away from her to open his arms, motioning for her to hand him their son. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 complies and 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟 holds him tight. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏, look. She looks at where he was pointing, seeing their son looking around at everything with wonder. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 has your eyes. He has your sense of wonder. They speak at the same time, and when they're done they look at each other and laugh, wanting to join. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟 begins to laugh as well, making them smile. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 runs her hand through the tiny bit of green hair that was growing on his head, looking at 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟 with nothing but love. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟 looks at 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 as well, holding him like he was the most precious thing in the whole world. I wonder what quirk he'll have when he grows up, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟 mumbles softly. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 looks over at him, shaking her head. You and your quirks, she teases. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 was a scientist who specialized in the study of quirks. It was something he liked to talk about often, and she suspected he had been that way even before they met. Once 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 was born, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 created theory after theory about what type of quirk he would have. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 smiles almost cheekily. What can I say, 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏? Quirks are so fascinating. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 lets out a joyful gurgle, as if he were agreeing. The two adults look at him, smiling. 𝗧𝗪𝙢, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 calls, using the side of his crib to hold himself up. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 stands at the door, looking at his son with a small smile. He walks over to the crib, patting 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏's head. Hey there, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, he greets. Did you just wake up from your nap? Was it good? 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 throws his arms up, making grabby motions. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 chuckles at this and gently hoists the boy up, holding him. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 giggles slightly when 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏's hand grazes his belly. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 chuckles once more, knowing he found one of 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏's many ticklish spots. Holding the boy securely, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 tickles him, making 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 laugh more and more. He doesn't realize that the items in 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏's room are floating. He doesn't see the toys inside the toy bin start floating out and into the air. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 doesn't notice anything is floating toward him and 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 until he gets smacked in the face by a teddy bear. Startled, he pulls the stuffed toy off of his face and stares at it. Suddenly, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 chuckles dryly as he puts 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 back into his crib. So, you have a quirk, he says quietly, sounding dejected and distant. Signs of quirks usually don't appear until a child is 4 years old, but there are some cases where signs appear before a child turns 4. However, it is rare. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 looks up at him with wide, curious eyes. 𝗧𝗪𝗏, he exclaims. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 pats his head gently and with that same air of distance in his voice. I was hoping you would have been quirkless. It would have saved me an inconvenience. But then again, your quirk isn't exactly inconvenient. No longer sounding so distant, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 almost sounded delighted over the opportunity presented to him. Your case, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, is quite rare. Quite rare indeed. He looks at 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 with a slight gleam in his eyes. I'm sorry about this, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, but you'll see that this will benefit the both of us in the future. 𝗧𝗪𝗏. 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 wasn't home to hear 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏's cries. No one ever noticed the odd tics 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 had, outside of his love for the nature of quirks. They knew he enjoyed talking about quirks, and he loved his wife to pieces. Originally, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 had no intention of marrying 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏. When they met, he had only thought of her as a pleasant distraction. That was, until her confession. They had been seeing each other between his studies for several months. It was one such time between his studies when they were in the library, and during this time 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 cornered him to express her feelings. This had caused him to pause for a moment, thinking, this could benefit me. That day 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 informed 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗏 that he shared her feelings, and a vision of the future he wanted to see began to form. They had been together for about 1 year before he proposed to her, and it was only a short 9 months after their wedding when 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 was born. For 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏, those had been the first steps towards his vision of the future. Those had been the easier steps. The foreseen harder ones would come later. If he miscalculated, his vision of the future could be delayed. It wouldn't be long before one of those hard steps arrived. Today was one of those steps when 𝗃𝗀𝗃 was out of the house running some errands. This left 𝗧𝗧𝗃 and 𝗧𝗏𝗃 home alone for father and son time. Entering 𝗧𝗏𝗃's room, 𝗧𝗧𝗃 finds him playing on the ground right by his toy box. 𝗧𝗏𝗃 looks up at his father, a big smile on his face. "Daughter," he exclaims with a giggle. 𝗧𝗧𝗃 bends down to pick him up and 𝗧𝗏𝗃 happily reaches his arms up. Clinging onto his father's shirt, he was curious as to where his father would take him today. With 𝗧𝗏𝗃 in his arms, 𝗧𝗧𝗃 leaves and goes into the main room of the apartment. 𝗧𝗏𝗃 quizzically looks at his father. "Daughter." Ignoring 𝗧𝗏𝗃, 𝗧𝗧𝗃 slips into his shoes and grabs the bag he placed on the couch. While reaching for the bag, the front door opens unexpectedly. Walking through the front door, 𝗃𝗀𝗃 catches sight of 𝗧𝗧𝗃 holding 𝗧𝗏𝗃 in his arms. She smiles at first, thinking of how much she loved her two boys. She always smiled when she thought of them spending quality time together. She sees the two of them dressed, 𝗧𝗏𝗃 in his pajamas and 𝗧𝗧𝗃 dressed in his usual attire. She doesn't think anything of it until she sees the out-of-place traveling bag 𝗧𝗧𝗃 had in his hand. "𝗧𝗧𝗃, what are you doing?" 𝗃𝗀𝗃's voice stops him. "Mama," 𝗧𝗏𝗃 exclaims happily, eyes lighting up when he sees her. 𝗧𝗧𝗃 turns around to see 𝗃𝗀𝗃 standing in the doorway, a bewildered look on her face, and her smile slowly changing. "𝗧𝗧𝗃, what's going on?" she asks once more, making him sigh. Putting down the bag, 𝗧𝗧𝗃 reaches to pinch the bridge of his nose while looking directly into her eyes, coldly. "I really wasn't expecting you to be home so soon. I had hoped not to make this harder than it had to be. I had planned on leaving with 𝗧𝗏𝗃 before you got home." He sees her flinch in surprise. She stares at him for a while, trying to break down and understand what her husband was saying. "𝗧𝗧𝗃, I don't understand. Why are you taking him? Why are you leaving?" she screams in her head. She runs through every possible reason she could think of to justify why he would leave. He has the perfect job, the son he wanted, and they have a good marriage. So why was he leaving and taking their son with him? "He's my son," 𝗧𝗧𝗃 replies, as if it makes perfect sense to him. It's all he offers as an explanation as he picks up his bag and starts toward the door. 𝗃𝗀𝗃 moves to block him. "Don't take him away, please. 𝗧𝗧𝗃, I'm begging you, don't take him from me. You can't do this," she cries, latching onto his arm, trying to stop him from moving any further. 𝗧𝗧𝗃 ignores her. "Why are you doing this?" I thought we were a family," 𝗃𝗀𝗃 exclaims. This makes 𝗧𝗧𝗃 stop and look down at her. 𝗃𝗀𝗃 freezes as she stares up into cold, lifeless eyes. Eyes that suddenly made her feel very insignificant. This is not the man she fell in love with. Who is this stranger wearing her husband's face? "A family, huh?" 𝗧𝗧𝗃 says. "You must be joking. You are nothing but a pawn in my game of chess." Along with the coldness in his eyes, that statement shook her, causing her to stumble back. The realization of what was going on slowly causes tears to well up in her eyes. Overwhelmed with the coldness and the realization of her two boys being taken away, she collapses against the door. Sliding down to the floor, all she could do was watch as 𝗧𝗧𝗃 walks out the door with 𝗧𝗏𝗃 in his arm. 𝗧𝗏𝗃 watches as his mother falls against the door, sliding to the ground. He can tell she's upset, which confuses him as he's never sensed her upset before. 𝗧𝗏𝗃 looks toward his father and suddenly feels the coldness of his emotions. He doesn't know this man. Who was this stranger holding him? Why was his mother crying? Overwhelmed, 𝗧𝗏𝗃 begins to cry as he reaches out to his mother. He wants to comfort her and escape from the cold man holding him. 𝗃𝗀𝗃, hearing 𝗧𝗏𝗃's cries, instinctively begins to get up off the ground as she reaches for her little boy. 𝗧𝗧𝗃, realizing that the scene would begin to attract unwanted attention, looks towards 𝗃𝗀𝗃 and says, "That'll be enough of that. Sleep." Suddenly, 𝗃𝗀𝗃's body feels heavy, her eyes beginning to close. The last thing 𝗃𝗀𝗃 sees is this stranger telling 𝗧𝗏𝗃 to sleep and his small body going limp. Her last thought as sleep overcomes her is, will she ever see her two boys again? Looking down at the sleeping child in his arm, 𝗧𝗧𝗃 saying to himself as much as to the child, "From this moment on, you'll be known as Izuku. Midoriya Izuku." Then with a smile of satisfaction, he walks out of the house knowing that Midoriya 𝗧𝗧𝗃 and 𝗧𝗏𝗃 would disappear that day. Izuku's first and oldest memory is of warmth and laughter. There's two people talking, but he can't decipher what they're saying to each other. One of the voices belongs to a woman. He knows that much. He assumes it's his mother, but he doesn't remember much about her. He has dreams sometimes, where he gets hints as to who she was to him. Sometimes he hears soft humming as he is rocked back and forth, cradled in her arms. Sometimes he hears her crying. On those nights when he has that dream, there's a storm in his head, and tonight is no different. He jolts awake, the woman's cries echoing in his head. He can't seem to forget the blurred images from his dream. All he can remember is green hair and tears. There is nothing else. It bothers him. He can't get rid of the blurry faces and the unknown feelings that come with the dream. Izuku lets himself fall back on his bed and he stares up at the ceiling. He tries to forget about the dream and fall back asleep. He closes his eyes, but after 10 minutes, he finds that he can't sleep. There's a storm raging in his head and Izuku can't find a way to calm it. Murmuring, maybe some water will help. He pushes himself up from his bed and stands. He turns toward his desk, grabs his analysis notebook and pen, and exits his room. He walks into the kitchen and grabs a glass of water. Izuku takes a seat at the table and lets himself think. He flips open his notebook and begins to write. Ever since he was a child, Izuku wanted to be a hero. He was fascinated with the idea of quirks and the world of heroes. Izuku wanted to be a hero more than anything. The only problem, he couldn't be one. He was quirkless after all. Izuku expected his father to be disappointed when the doctor informed them of the news, but he wasn't. He appeared sad to learn his son was quirkless. He only patted him on the head and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Izuku, I almost feel like it's my fault. Destiny can be quite cruel. Only time would tell how cruel destiny would be." Life would take a cruel twist a short time later as word spread in his neighborhood that he was quirkless. Growing up, there was a park Izuku frequently visited with his father. While Izuku played with neighboring kids, his father mingled with the other parents. However, after the neighbors learned of his condition, the neighboring kids weren't as eager to play with him. Some people would turn away in pity while others avoided him like the plague. Even his childhood friend turned against him and began to bully him. In order to avoid the thoughts that plagued his mind, Izuku turned his attention to heroes. Whenever his thoughts would begin to spiral downwards, he distracted himself with studying popular heroes. He would spend his time studying every single detail about them he could. Who knows, maybe his fascination with quirks was his father's influence. After all, it was his father who taught him how to analyze and categorize quirks. Hearing his father talk about them so often, he couldn't help but pick up his father's attraction for the peculiar abilities that people possessed. He wrote down every observation and every note he thought of. He studied their quirks and often picked them apart until he couldn't anymore, until he began to grow jealous of them. He wished more than anything to have a quirk. The heroes he saw were so lucky. They were celebrated, praised, and most of all, accepted. He wanted his father to look at him the way he looked at heroes. During the course of studying heroes, he came across one hero in particular, All Might. He tried to pick apart his quirk best he could, but it never worked. Did All Might have a super strength quirk? Maybe a speed augmentation quirk? Izuku wasn't sure. It was one of the world's greatest mysteries, and it was a challenge he couldn't resist. Something about All Might compelled him, drew him in. Looking at All Might, he found himself being inspired by his acts of heroism. Even though All Might was his #1 curiosity, he was always stumbling upon other heroes that fascinated him. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐻 was one such hero. While going over his notes on the recently debuted hero, Izuku let out a tired sigh. He's been hunting for any new information he could get his hands on. While searching for the information, the sound of a chair wheeling into the room and the kitchen light turning on catches his attention. He turns in his chair and meets the green eyes of his father. "Father," Izuku exclaims in surprise. He watches as his father leans forward in his wheelchair. "Izuku, what are you doing up so late?" Izuku lets out a small nervous laugh, hoping his father wouldn't be upset that he was still up. I woke up and couldn't fall back asleep," he explains. Judging from the way his father was looking at him with raised eyebrows, he wasn't sure if he was believed. "I see. Is there a particular reason why?" Puzzled over the lack of his father's reaction, Izuku frowns a bit. He wasn't quite sure how to explain why he found himself awake at such an hour. It's because of a dream I've been having the past couple of nights. It's kind of been bugging me and I can't stop wondering about it, and because of that I've had trouble sleeping." His father observes Izuku for a few moments before nodding his head. "Would you like to talk about it?" Apprehensively rubbing his hands together as he tends to do when he's nervous, Izuku hesitates before agreeing. He was worried about how his father would react. "I keep having these dreams where I see a woman's face but it's blurry and I think it's Mom. But I don't have a clear view of what's going on. Everything feels warm and I can hear her humming and a part of me feels like it's her." He pauses. "I don't understand why I'm having these dreams. I never even knew her, Mom, right? Why would I be dreaming about her?" His father sighs quietly while reaching for the wheels of his chair. The human mind has odd ways of coping with stressful situations, and this is most likely yours. Your mind is creating these dreams of what you imagine your mother to have felt like to alleviate the burden of your stress. He explains as he rolls his chair closer to Izuku, and suddenly everything makes sense. Nodding, Izuku feels himself relax, as if a hand had reached out and gently squeezed his shoulder. Now, go back to bed. Your lessons start early tomorrow. Izuku nods. Good night, father, he says as he gets up. Without a second glance, he goes back to his room. Like his dreams, his glass of water was forgotten. Hisashi stares at the half-empty glass as he frowns in thought, wondering if this would be the last time. Good night, Izuku, he says after his son has left the room. Hisashi lets out a tired sigh, one that has centuries worth of tiredness woven in. His eyes drift over to the open notebook on the table. If only you knew, Izuku. As Midoriya Izuku jogs around town, he tries to avoid puddles from the recent storm. He has music playing in his earbuds as he observes the scenery around him. He sees people making their way to work and students heading to school. Izuku was a bit envious of them. He never had a chance to experience going to school. His father had him homeschooled, denying him the social interaction that public school would have granted him. Although he loves his father, he resents the idea of being kept in the house to learn, instead of being able to make friends and learn alongside them. As he's jogging, Izuku stops short just shy of running into somebody as his routine is interrupted by a sudden bang that echoes in the air. To Izuku, the bang sounded like a loud metal sheet falling to the ground. Looking around, Izuku sees a crowd gathering, most likely near the source of the bang. He moves toward the crowd, his curiosity getting the best of him. A villain, someone in the crowd exclaims. Looking in the direction of the villain, Izuku spots what could have been a metal tower, but was now a bent and twisted pile of metal laying on the ground. The tower was most likely a victim of the villain's rampage and the source of the bang he heard seconds before. People in the crowd begin to murmur around him, some irritated and some excited, watching as the villain isn't left unattended for long. A few heroes show up and Izuku recognizes them. That's Backdraft, Death Arms. Oh, there's that new hero, 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗎. Izuku winces when a crowd of fangirls scream by his ear. He reaches for his yellow backpack and pulls out his analysis notebook and a pen. He scribbles down his notes as he watches the fight. One look at you and I can tell exactly what you are, a stranger exclaims with a smile. A fanboy. Izuku looks up, surprised, as his cheeks go red in embarrassment. He simply nods his head in reply. Thankfully, the stranger says nothing else. Backdraft and Death Arms are dealing with the collateral damage while 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗎 deals with the villain. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗎, about to use his special move, is caught off guard when a giant foot suddenly punts the villain, causing him to go flying. The owner of the giant foot is a woman who introduces herself as Mount Lady. Everyone is surprised by her sudden appearance, including 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝗎, whose thunder she just stole. Excited by the appearance of the new heroine, Izuku hurriedly takes as many notes as he can, ignoring the clamor of people around him. He jots down the observations he makes about Mount Lady's height and costume, already theorizing about any special moves she may have. He then begins to note some obvious strengths and weaknesses of her quirk. As the villain is captured, the crowd dies down and Izuku is still writing. He ends up mumbling out loud and the stranger from before laughs, overhearing him. Taking notes, hoping to be a hero yourself, kid? He asks. Izuku looks up from his notes and bashfully smiles. More than anything, the stranger gives him a thumbs up and a few words of encouragement before he walks away. Izuku finishes his notes and puts his book back into his bag before he continues on his jog, a bit more pep in his step than before, and those puddles be damned. When Izuku returns home, he hears his father talking to someone. He decides to listen for a few more minutes before entering the room the voices are coming from. When he enters the room, Izuku sees his father in his chair, speaking with Shigaraki through a screen. Shigaraki, he mumbles quietly, mostly to himself. Shigaraki Tamura was someone who Izuku's father took in a few years back. Izuku wasn't old enough to know exactly how his father found Shigaraki, but the older boy has been around for quite a while. His father turns to face Izuku. Back from your jog so soon? He asks. Izuku nods. There was a villain attack so the streets weren't crowded. I see, he says, excusing himself from the conversation with Shigaraki. Well, let's begin your lessons for the day, he suggests as he rolls himself from the room, with Izuku following close behind. Now, Izuku was never shielded from knowing his father was a villain. He's known for years, but he doesn't know much. His father keeps his explanations vague whenever Izuku asks. His father enters the room Izuku's come to know as his classroom. He sits down at the table in the room, his notebooks already there waiting for him. Alright, let's begin. Izuku's lessons lasted 8 hours, starting from early in the morning and ending late in the afternoon. After his lessons are over, he's able to do whatever. So once his father dismisses him, Izuku heads out of the house with his favorite yellow backpack. He isn't sure where he wants to go. Maybe he'll just walk around until he figures something out. Izuku flips through the pages of his notebook, bored. As he's walking, something comes up from behind him. "Ah, perfect," a voice exclaims, and suddenly Izuku becomes enveloped in slime. His first instinct is to fight, so he kicks and punches blindly. "Quit struggling, kid, and this'll all be over quickly. I can't breathe." His arms move to try to grab at the slime in his mouth. He can't get a grip on it. He can barely breathe and his eyes start closing. "Father, I'm sorry," he thinks, hating the feeling of disappointing his father again. Before he could fall unconscious, a strong wind pressure blows the slime surrounding him away. Suddenly, he's falling, but a pair of arms catch him. When Izuku wakes up, it's to the feeling of something tapping his cheek. Slowly, his eyes begin to open. Yellow, nothing but yellow. Blinking as he shakes his head, Izuku's vision clears enough for him to realize that there's a smile mixed in with the yellow. "Yo, thought I lost you there for a second." Slowly, he places the voice and begins to realize who's in front of him, and once he realizes, Izuku shrieks, All Might." He's pushing himself away before he realizes, and his eyes are wide. "Well, looks like you didn't suffer any major injuries. Sorry about that back there, young man. Usually I'm more aware of the surroundings and the civilians." Putting a hand on his forehead, "But the sewer system is pretty hard to navigate." He laughs. Izuku stares as his hero talks, stammering for words. "Anyways, you were a big help. Thank you." All Might was thanking him. "I've captured the evildoer. The most amazing hero in the whole world is standing right in front of me. This isn't a dream, is it?" Izuku finally snaps out of his trance and begins fishing through his pockets and bag. "I need to get an autograph. I know I've got a pen in here somewhere." He looks up at All Might, pleading, "Please sign my notebook." He picks it up and flips it open, seeing it already signed. He bows as All Might gives him a thumbs up. The hero then puts the villain trapped in soda bottles into his pockets. "Well, I better take this guy to the police. Thanks again for the help and stay safe, young man," he says with a small wave. "Wait, you're leaving already?" Izuku hates how clear the disappointment sounds in his voice. Pro heroes are constantly fighting time as well as enemies, the hero says as he stretches out his legs. Izuku takes a small step forward, as if to stop him. "He can't go yet. I have so many things I want to ask him." "Now stand back. I'm taking off," All Might warns before he shoots into the air. "Thanks for your support," he shouts to Izuku, unknowing to the weight on his leg. When he realizes that the boy has clung to his leg, he freaks. Hey, what do you think you're doing, young man?" he exclaims. "Let go. I love my fans, but this is too much," All Might shouts as he tries to get Izuku to loosen his grip. "But were I in midair, if I let 𝗔𝗨𝗧𝗔𝗍 die," Izuku exclaims, his voice wobbly thanks to flying. All Might suddenly stops trying to push him off, realizing the boy was right. "Oh, right. I just have a lot I want to ask you about. You're my favorite hero, All Might, please." All Might stares at the boy for a moment in sighs. All right. Just keep your eyes and mouth shut." Izuku nods and hides his face in the fabric of the hero's pants. All Might grabs onto Izuku's collar, making sure to hold on tightly. He hears the boy's small whine of fear. Using his fist to cover up his cough, All Might looks in front of him. Some blood drips from his mouth and he frowns. Shit. Izuku and All Might land on a rooftop, and Izuku has never been happier to be on the ground. His entire body is shaking. "My whole life just flashed before my eyes," he murmurs. "Not a very smart move," All Might begins. "Bang on the door for a while, someone will let you in. Now I have to go. See you on the flip side," the hero exclaims, waving as he walks towards the edge of the roof. Izuku snaps out of his shakes and straightens up. Wait, not yet. 1 second, please," he begs. "No, I don't have any time." Ignoring the thought, Izuku stands up. "I have to know. I'm sorry, Izuku. Destiny can be quite cruel. He's worthless to his father, isn't he? Compared to the world his father and 80% of the population lived in, Izuku is insignificant. Sometimes he feels like a failure compared to others. He feels like he failed his father. Maybe if he had a quirk, or even if he could do something important, maybe then." Addressing his anxieties to All Might, is it still possible to be a hero even without a quirk? Clenching his fists and staring at the ground, he was so intent on getting out what he'd been wanting to ask the hero for years. He doesn't notice All Might was no longer moving. I'm a normal kid without any powers. Can I ever hope to be someone like you? Looking down at the child standing in front of him, the boy's words run through All Might's mind. The words of without a quirk running on repeat. He thinks of the dangers of being a hero, the risks this child would have to take daily, and the repercussions that this moment could have on the boy's future. His instincts kick in, yelling at him to say it's better to focus on being the best person you can be, young man. Or you don't need a quirk to belong, young man. Nothing sounds right to him. A part of him, deep down, wants to reassure this young boy in front of him that the sky is the limit, that he can do it because, quirk or no quirk, he still mattered to the world, and if he wanted to be a hero, do it, quirk be damned. However, All Might knows that as much as he wants to keep the boy's dreams from being crushed, he had to stop this here and now, before the young man could get himself injured. Or worse. So, he takes a breath, knowing that what he was about to say was probably one of the hardest things he's ever had to do, and speaks, without a quirk. Before he could finish the sentence, an intense pain shoots through him. Steam starts rolling off his body and he tenses up. Oh no, not now, damn it, not here. Ever since I was a kid, people teased me because I didn't have a quirk. My lack of quirk drives me want to prove my worth to them, prove my worth to him. He rubs his fingers together absent-mindedly as he speaks. Though, you're probably confused about who he is. He trails off. He's someone important to me that loves quirks. He always talks about them and it makes sense, it's his field of study. Izuku stares at the ground, nervous and unsure. But, I feel like because I'm quirkless, I failed him somehow. I want to show him that I can be strong enough to protect and reassure even though I'm quirkless. I want to help him somehow. Izuku finally looks up. I want to be a hero just like why. He's interrupted by his scream of surprise. Standing in All Might's place is an incredibly skinny man. Why, you deflated? Izuku cries. Are you actually All Might? You can't be, right? He exclaims. The man looks at him, letting out a small sigh. I can assure you that I am all in. The blood pouring out of his mouth as he speaks makes Izuku shriek once more. I am impossible. Izuku cries in disbelief. You know how guys at the pool are always sucking in and flexing and trying to look buff? All Might asks as he wipes the blood from his chin. I'm like that. This can't be real. Izuku begins. No, I'm dreaming. All Might's the giant of a man who saves everyone. He defeats all obstacles and saves the day with a fearless smile. All Might lets out a sigh. There's plenty of fear behind that smile, he says and sits down on the ground. I'm counting on you to keep your mouth shut. Don't go talking about this online or telling your friends. Izuku stares in confusion but flinches back when the hero lifts up his shirt to reveal a nasty-looking injury. It looks as if half of All Might's stomach was sunken in, red and purple scarring left in its wake. Pretty gross, right? I got this in a fight about 5 years back. My respiratory system was destroyed. I lost my whole stomach. All of the surgeries have pretty much worn me out. I can't be fixed. Right now I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day. Rest of the time, this is what I look like. No way, Izuku gasps. 5 years ago. So does that mean it was the fight with Toxic Chainsaw? You really know your stuff, kid. But no. All Might makes a fist. The punk may have landed some hits but he couldn't bring me down. Most of the world has never heard of this fight. I did everything I could to keep it under wraps. A major fight 5 years ago. I'm supposed to be the guy that's always smiling, right? I'm the symbol of peace. People everywhere have to think that I'm never afraid. But honestly, I smile to hide the fear inside. It's just a brave face I put on when the pressure is high. This job isn't easy. All Might stares directly at Izuku. Pro heroes are always risking their lives. Some villains just can't be beaten without powers. So can you be a hero? Not without a quirk. Izuku's eyes widen and suddenly, everything sounds muffled. I see. He murmurs as All Might stands. If the hero says anything else, Izuku doesn't catch it. I can't be a hero. Can't be a hero. Can't be. He doesn't stop thinking of All Might's words. He can't stop thinking of All Might's words. All Might's words mean he can't ever be useful to his father. Those words mean Izuku is nothing but a failure. Tears prick his eyes and he snaps out of his daze, furiously wiping at them. When he looks at the rooftop, he sees that All Might is no longer there. Head hanging low, Izuku walks home. He's silent as he tries to keep the tears at bay. Don't cry, damn it. He's still in shock. He didn't expect his idol to tell him the one thing everyone had been telling him since he was a child. Maybe he was just trying to distract himself from reality. Maybe he has always known deep down that he was never going to become a hero. Izuku was destined to be a failure to his father forever. He lets out a sigh and looks up just in time to see people running and a crowd forming. What's going on? He asks no one in particular as he runs in the same direction. When he's close enough to the crowd, he catches sight of flames. Curious now, Izuku tries to push through the crowd until he's standing in the front. He sees what's going on and his eyes widen. That villain's got someone trapped. Someone mumbles. Izuku's hands cover his mouth as he whimpers quietly. A realization dawns on him. That's the same villain as before. I thought All Might trapped him. How did he get away? Izuku feels his entire body freeze as he realizes what could have happened. The bottles he had him trapped in probably fell when I latched onto him. This is all my fault. Feeling guilt and panic, Izuku frantically looks around for the heroes. Caught in the hold of the very villain that All Might saved him from was his childhood friend, Kaken. He sees the heroes around the area switching from trying to save Kaken to focusing on damage control. Izuku knows they aren't going to be able to do anything, not when they weren't going to receive backup from the #1 hero. His eyes lock with Kaken's, and the rest is a blur. After being chewed out by the heroes for putting himself into danger, Izuku heads home. As he's walking home, Kaken stops him and berates him for saving him. That was fine for Izuku. He didn't need a thank you. If he had gotten one, it probably would have given him hope that he still had a chance to be a hero. Izuku sighs quietly and he walks in the direction of his home. His father is probably wondering why he isn't home yet. He better hurry up and get home soon. He hopes everything that just happened won't be made into a big deal, but Izuku can't be sure. He has a feeling that what he doesn't want to happen will most definitely happen. I am here. A familiar voice shouts and suddenly All Might is in front of him. Izuku shrieks in surprise. All Might, where did you come from? He looks around. How did you get rid of all those reporters? All Might laughs. I stand for justice, he says. Not sound bites. Because I am All Might. The hero is interrupted by a cough and some blood spills from his mouth, causing Izuku to yelp. All Might coughs a little bit longer and Izuku waits for him to collect himself. Young man, I came here to thank you and to talk to you about your question from earlier. Izuku blinks. His question? Oh, his question about being a hero. If you hadn't told me about your life, if you hadn't run into that fight, I would have been a worthless bystander watching from the crowd. So thanks. Izuku is quick to argue. Oh no, it was my fault he was there to begin with. I got in the way of your work. He looks to the side and grows quieter. And, not to mention your time. I'm not done. All Might's voice is gentle, which surprises Izuku. He thought that the hero would have been upset with him, but he wasn't. You told me that you didn't have a power, so when I saw this timid, quirkless boy try to save a life, it inspired me to act too. Izuku looks over at All Might, eyes beginning to widen. What did he mean by that? He inspired All Might to act. That couldn't be right, he was Deku. There are stories about every hero, how they became great. Most have one thing in common, their bodies moved before they could think, almost on their own. Izuku's gasp was soft and barely hearable as he began to realize what All Might was saying. He wasn't dreaming, was he? Tears prick his eyes and he tries to fight them back to no avail. All Might smiled a bit. And today, that's what happened to you. Izuku couldn't fight back his tears anymore. Young man, you too can become a hero. The dam breaks and Izuku cries, loud and full of joy. It's been 2 days since Izuku encountered All Might and was given a chance to become a hero. It's early in the morning and Izuku is tired. He's up even earlier than he normally is. But All Might had said to meet him at Dagoba Municipal Beach Park early in the morning. Izuku can hear the sound of waves crashing into water as he approaches the beach. He sees garbage scattered all over the place. Amongst the garbage is a large man, one who Izuku would be able to spot, even miles away. When All Might sees him arrive, the hero grins. Good morning. He greets and Izuku smiles at him. Part of him still can't believe that All Might was going to train him. Even though his father didn't think he had much potential, it was mind-boggling to Izuku that the #1 hero thought he did. Good morning, All Might. He greets in reply. So why did you want me to meet you at Dagoba? Izuku asks, looking around at all of the trash. All Might smiles. This is where you'll be training, my boy. My training will be here, at the beach. Izuku asks, bewildered. Why here? Laughing. All Might replies, my quirk is a whole lot to handle. The combined physical of the previous user's abilities creates a hurricane of pure force. An unprepared body can't handle it. Your arms would shoot off if you tried to. Shoot off? Izuku shrieks, rubbing his arms. He shakes his head and looks around. Oh okay, so this is kind of like a hardcore gym workout then. He looks at All Might. Which would make you my trainer. The hero nods in approval with a thumbs up. You got it, he exclaims. But that's not the only reason. I did some research yesterday and it turns out this part of the beach used to be beautiful, but it's been a total mess for the last few years. Izuku watches as All Might hits the edge of a fridge that had been dumped there. The fridge dents from his small punch and Izuku can't hold back his amazement at the pure power the hero has. That's right, he murmurs, and he takes a look at all of the trash once more. Thanks to the ocean's currents, anything that gets dropped into the water gets washed up here. Some people like to take advantage of that when they're illegally dumping their trash. Now all of the locals avoid this place. Placing his hand on the top of the fridge, All Might continues. Heroes these days are all about showing off and capturing flashy villains. He begins pushing down on the fridge as he speaks. Things were different before Quirks. Service is what mattered. Back then, heroes were those who helped the community, even if it was kind of boring. By the end of All Might's sentence, the fridge was crushed and a loud boom goes through the air. Izuku stares in awe. You'll restore the coastline for this entire section of the beach. That's the first step in your path, young man, to becoming a hero. Izuku blinks. All this, but there's so much. It's impossible, he exclaims. He thought his father's training was hard, but All Might's training seemed a lot tougher. While his father had him doing 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups in the morning and before going to bed, All Might had him picking up trash that weighed way more than he did. All Might walks over to Izuku asking, young Midoriya, you want to go to U.S.J, right? Well, yeah, of course. You went there, so it must be the best school around, right? He looks down and clenches his fist with determination. It's a long shot, but still, I'm gonna prove myself. You've got a lot of spirit, fanboy, All Might exclaims. Izuku's cheeks heat up in embarrassment at the nickname. But, as I mentioned before, being a hero isn't as easy as wearing a jumpsuit with a cape and running around when you don't have a quirk. All Might puts his hands on his hips. It's not fair, but that's the reality, and UA is the hardest hero course to get into. So that means I have to prepare for your quirk really fast. U.S. exam is in 10 months. Izuku interrupts. All Might turns around, pulling 5 papers from out of nowhere. Not to worry, kid. I've got you covered with the help of the handy 𝗵𝗃 American Dream Plan, he exclaims. Follow this to the letter and the beach will be cleaned up in no time. As long as you stick to this plan, you should be able to clean up the beach within 4 months. Since you're already in shape, there's less work for us to do. Once the beach is cleaned, we can spend the last 6 months working on your control of One for All. All Might hands the papers to Izuku. Wow, he even detailed my sleep schedule, he observes as he skims through the papers. How am I going to handle this and continue father's trading? The hero leans close to Izuku, whispering in his ear, to be honest, sticking to this plan is going to be difficult. Do you think you're up to the challenge? Of course I am. I have to work harder than anyone else to get into UA. Izuku agrees, already beginning to think about how he was going to balance All Might's training along with his father's. All Might grins and gives Izuku a thumbs up. Then let's get to work, fanboy. 4 months seem to pass within the blink of an eye. Izuku doesn't have a hard time juggling training with All Might, his father, and his schooling. He thought it'd be harder to balance everything, but it worked out just fine. Izuku's only problem had been that he pushed himself too hard. Izuku knows quite well that he tends to push himself to the extreme. He does it too often not to know. However, he hadn't realized how bad of a problem it could be until All Might scolded him. Izuku had been jogging behind All Might as he walked across the trail. All Might was saying something that Izuku couldn't really pay attention to. He was too focused on trying to stay upright. He wanted nothing more than to let himself fall on the pavement and take a 6-hour-long nap. But he couldn't. He had to keep going. Izuku tried to focus on his breathing, trying to get it to even out. He'd only been jogging for 10 minutes. He shouldn't be so winded yet. If he hadn't been so focused on his breathing, he probably would have realized one of his shoes were untied. And if he had realized that, well, he certainly wouldn't have tripped. All Might turned around the minute he heard a thud, and he immediately went over to his student. Young Midoriya, are you all right? He asked. He then crouched down by the boy, and that's when he noticed the slight bags under Izuku's eyes. He also noticed how worn out the boy seemed, which made him frown. My boy, you haven't been following the plan, have you? He didn't get a response from Izuku. Sighing, he said, young Midoriya, I understand your will to become a hero, but pushing yourself too hard will have the exact opposite effect of what we want. Izuku pushed himself up with trembling arms. And sorry, All Might. He apologized as he raised himself to look up at his mentor. But I have to work way harder than anyone else if I want to stand a chance against the other applicants. I have to prove myself. The pro hero stared at his student with surprise. He hadn't expected the boy's will to be so strong. He knew that Izuku wanted to be a hero, but he had no idea the boy was so willing to push himself so hard. Letting out a sigh, All Might put a hand on Izuku's shoulder. I understand your concerns, young Midoriya, but there's no need to push yourself so hard when I am here. I'll make sure that you can stand on equal ground with the other students. After that, All Might reworked the aim to pass American Dream plan, and this time, Izuku didn't modify it at all. He followed it and eventually, the coastline of the beach was restored. Young Midoriya, All Might exclaims, seeing the coastline clear. He approaches Izuku, who was covered in sweat from all the lifting he had been doing. The boy turns around and gives All Might a smile. I did it, All Might, he says, and the pro hero feels proud. He puts a hand on Izuku's shoulder. You did, he exclaims with a thumbs up. The work you've done the past 4 months have really paid off. You've certainly molded yourself into the perfect vessel for one for all. Izuku's smile is blinding after All Might says that. He continues, now, it's time to give you my quirk. Izuku watches with awe, wondering how All Might will pass his quirk to him. The hero reaches up to his head and pulls out a strand of hair. Izuku's amazement quickly turns into disbelief. Don't tell me. All Might grins as he holds out the strand of hair for Izuku to take. Eat this. Izuku stares at the strand of hair, deadpan. Izuku lays in bed, staring up at the ceiling. Countless thoughts go through his head that prevent him from sleeping. He's too excited to sleep anyways. Izuku holds out his arm, staring at his hand. He clenches it into a fist, hoping to feel the power of his quirk running through him. He doesn't. Keep in mind, young Midoriya, your body still has to digest. I'd say give it 24 hours or so for one for all to appear. Come back here tomorrow and we'll take a look. Izuku sighs, soft and quiet. Everything that's happened over the past 4 months still surprises him. If someone had told him 4 months ago that his idol, All Might, would become his mentor and give him his quirk, Izuku would have thought that they were joking. Smiling a bit, Izuku closes his eyes, excited for the next day to come. The following day, Izuku ends up waking up earlier than expected. He checks the time and sees it's currently 6 in the morning. He doesn't need to be at Dagobah Beach until 7, so he decides to get some work done. Izuku changes into his running clothes but doesn't leave to go for his morning run right away. Instead, he decides to grab his hero analysis book and add new information. He goes into his phone and almost immediately finds news on recent hero fights. Izuku begins reading through the information he finds and jots down new observations and new theories in his notebook. He finds an article on Mount Lady and Kamui Woods working together and updates their information in his book. He does this for half an hour and then, when he decides he's found enough information, he goes out on his morning run. He puts his earbuds in and plays his music while he runs. Looking down at his watch, Izuku sees it's close to 7. He stops his run and takes a couple of breaths. After, he runs in the direction of Dagobah Beach. When he arrives, he sees All Might there and he can't help the smile that spreads across his face. He runs over to his mentor and greets him. Good morning, All Might. The pro hero turns around to look at him. Good morning, young Midoriya. Ready to test out that power of yours? He asks and Izuku can't help his excited nod. Excellent. Shall we begin? Okay. Izuku wasn't sure what he was expecting when he first used One for All, but it certainly wasn't the pain traveling up his arm. All Might had asked him to activate his quirk. After he activated the quirk, All Might wanted to test out its strength. So, like any normal mentor, All Might had Izuku punch a broken down fridge. It was incredibly painful, to say the least. Izuku had never felt something like that before. Even the injuries from Kaken had never hurt him so badly. In the end, Izuku had broken his arm, and All Might was worrying over him. He ended up taking Izuku to see Recovery Girl at UA. The woman had scolded All Might for being so reckless with Midoriya, and gave him a warning to be more careful. After being healed by Recovery Girl, Izuku was exhausted. He was trying to keep his eyes open as he and All Might made their way back to the beach. Halfway through the walk, All Might ended up giving Izuku a piggyback ride. Had Izuku been more aware of what was going on, he would have been as red as a tomato, and a stuttering mess. Afterwards, All Might and Izuku sat down to plan how they would move forward. They had to be extremely careful with how much of One for All Izuku could use before he broke himself. All Might decided it'd be best if Izuku used the quirk in small percentages and worked up his power from there. Getting control over One for All had been difficult, and repeatedly breaking his bones more than once hadn't helped either. All Might worked with him during the remaining months before the entrance exam to get at least some control over the powerful quirk. Eventually, the two discovered that Izuku was able to handle around 5% of the power. To know that he could handle a small amount of One for All made Izuku incredibly happy. Thus came the day that Izuku's father learned he had a quirk. Izuku waits for his father to finish his call with Shigaraki. His father has seemed stressed over the past few weeks and Izuku was worried about him. He hopes that now that he has a quirk, he can help his father. It doesn't take long for the call to end and his father opens the door with a quiet sigh. He looks and sees Izuku standing there. Izuku, did you need something? Izuku nods, rubbing his hands nervously. He was currently thinking of worst-case scenarios in his head. Anything can go wrong with One for All since he barely knows about the quirk. What if this is the one time it doesn't work? Or, what if he can't control how much power he uses? Izuku. He snaps out of his thoughts and takes a breath. There's something I need to show you, father. Izuku turns around and leads his father to the training room. As he follows his son, his mind is elsewhere. He's still thinking about his conversation with Shigaraki and the plans he may have to rearrange. He'd have to take some necessary precautions for what he was planning. Maybe I should prepare a namu for Shigaraki. Once they enter, Izuku goes over to the wooden boards he set up beforehand. His father watches him with an eyebrow raised, saying nothing. Izuku takes a second breath and powers up One for All. He feels the power channel through his body until it reaches his arm. The father watches Izuku with sudden interest. He feels a sudden pressure building up in the air. The force of the power feels familiar. Picture the egg in the microwave. It won't explode. Izuku focuses the energy into his fist and he punches the wooden boards, breaking them like they're paper. After, he turns and looks at his father, waiting for his reaction. You have a quirk, his father says, a bit surprised. Izuku slowly nods. Slowly a smile begins to creep across his face. Maybe that namu wasn't such a bad idea after all. As Izuku makes his way up the stairs of the UA building, he can't believe this is his school for the next 3 years. The acceptance rate that year was 1 in 300. There was 4 students accepted based on recommendation and 36 who got in thanks to the entrance exam, Izuku being one of them. Izuku runs through the halls of the school, trying to find his classroom. Class 1A. 1A. He mutters, already feeling the butterflies in his stomach. This is his first experience at a real school after all. Come on, where is it? He stops as he approaches a door that has a sign in front of it with 1A in bold print. On the door itself was a giant outline of 1A. Izuku stands in front of the door, eyes wide as he stares at it. Man, this thing is huge. Are there giants here? Pushing the thought aside, Izuku straightens up. The most promising students in the country are waiting behind this door. He murmurs to himself. He suddenly imagines Kaken and that scary boy from the entrance exam. Maybe we're in different classes. Maybe everyone here is super nice. Just as he's about to open the door, he hesitates. A conversation he had with his father comes to mind. Things in the dining room were quiet as Izuku sat with his father. They ate dinner in silence. Izuku couldn't keep his eyes focused on one thing. They darted around trying to look at anything but his father. There was an awkward tension in the air, as there usually was in moments like this. Things had been this way ever since Izuku was a child. He never understood why and he still didn't. Is this how things normally were between father and son? Izuku, I'd like to talk to you about something, his father said, and Izuku's eyes finally landed on him. Now that you have a quirk, I think you should aim for U.S. hero course. Really? Izuku exclaimed, pushing himself up from his chair with excitement. He had been worrying about telling his father he was going to apply to UA after all. His father was a villain and Izuku wasn't sure if he was going to approve. His father nodded, smiling at him. Of course, it's my greatest wish to see you accomplish your dreams after all. Izuku couldn't hide the smile forming on his face. But, there's a small favor I want you to do for me. Anything, Izuku exclaimed without thinking. He couldn't believe his father was asking him to help him. He was finally being noticed. What is it? I want you to put those observation skills of yours to use and take notes on the quirks you come into contact with and tell me about them. Izuku ignores his thoughts for now. He isn't stupid. He knows what his father wants him to do. He wants him to spy on his classmates. Even though he knows this, Izuku isn't sure how to handle the situation just yet. Maybe he'll have classmates that don't have any quirks worth mentioning to his father. Who am I kidding? This is UA. Of course everyone is going to have impressive quirks, especially if there's people like Kaken here. Deciding to ignore his thoughts, he opens the door. He's been standing outside the classroom long enough. The moment Izuku opens the door, he hears a commotion from inside. Take your feet off of that desk now. Huh? It's the first day and you're already disrespecting school property by scuffing up the desks, you cretin. You're kidding me, right? Did your old school put a stick up your ass, or were you born with it? Izuku sweats as he sees who the two people arguing are. Just my luck. The scary boy from the entrance exam goes quiet before placing a hand on his chest. Let's start over. I'm 𝗧𝗵𝗃 from 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Private Academy. 𝗧𝗵𝗃, so you must think you're better than me. I'm gonna have fun tearing you a new one. Kaken exclaims and Izuku can't suppress the small shudder that goes through his body. He never saw Kaken much after he was homeschooled, so it was terrifying to think of being so close to him again. Ida gasps in surprise. You would threaten your own classmate. Are you sure you're in the right place? Kaken just huffs in response. His eyes then land on Izuku and Izuku's body goes tense. Ida looks over in his direction as well. It's him, he says, and Izuku finds 18 pairs of eyes looking over at him. His face turns a bit red in embarrassment and he grips the straps of his bag tightly in his hands. Hi, he greets, and Izuku immediately wants to smack himself. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, even if it was for a split second. Good morning, Ida exclaims, making a beeline for him. My name is 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. I know. Izuku interrupts and Ida goes quiet. Maybe I shouldn't have cut him off like that. I'm Midoriya Izuku. It's nice to meet you, he says, and he once more wants to slap himself for how his voice trembled with nervousness. Midoriya-kun, you realized that there was something more to the practical exam, didn't you? You must be very perceptive and I completely misjudged you. I admit, as a student you're far superior to me. Izuku stares at Ida in surprise, sweat dropping. I find that hard to believe, he says. After all, during the exam he had no idea what he was doing. He hadn't been able to get any points for destroying the robots, and most of his points were rescue points. All he had done really was save that girl from the 0-pointer. He figured if he hadn't jumped first, someone else would have. Hey, I recognize that messed up hair. Izuku turns around to see the girl he saved during the entrance exam. Falling boy, she exclaims, and Izuku's face goes a bit red. You were awesome during the entrance exam. That punch was amazing. She continues to exclaim, making punching motions with her fist. Oh, hi, I should probably be thanking you for going in and talking to He stumbles over his words. The girl, 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏, looks him at quizzically. How do you know about that? She asks. As Izuku tries to explain and not sound like a fool. He doesn't see the way that a certain hothead is watching him. Bakugo Katsuki watches as Deku tries to talk to some extra. He can't wrap his head around why Deku of all people is at UA. He doesn't have a quirk, for crying out loud. How could the best hero school accept a quirkless wannabe? Besides, Katsuki didn't think Deku would be at UA since his crazy dad never let him go to regular school. Deku has been homeschooled all of his life. So why now? Katsuki clicks his tongue in annoyance. I'm gonna ruin that nerd right after I figure out how he got in. Uraraka seems oblivious to the very flustered Izuku as she talks to him. Izuku can't help it. He isn't used to speaking to someone for extended periods of time. After all, the only person he really speaks to is his father, and even that's short. Besides his father, there's All Might and Kaken, his idol and his bully. Izuku had started getting comfortable with speaking to All Might a couple weeks after his training began. And Izuku likes to limit how much he interacts with Kaken. What do you think we're doing today besides orientation? Uraraka asks. I wonder what our teachers are like. I'm so excited to meet everybody. If you're just here to make friends, then you can pack up your stuff now. The conversation is broken up as Izuku notices a sleeping bag laying in the doorway. Uraraka turns around to look. Welcome to U.S. Hero Course. Everyone watches as the bag is unzipped from the inside, revealing a disheveled man within. He pulls out a small smoothie packet and begins to drink from it. Izuku, Ida, and Uraraka watch in disbelief. What is that thing? The man then stands up, fully unzipping the sleeping bag. It took 8 seconds before you all shut up. That's not gonna work, he says. Time is precious. Rational students would understand that. Izuku stares at him. He looks familiar, but he can't figure it out. Who is this guy? If he's here, he must be some kind of pro. But he looks so worn out. What's his deal? The man looks around the classroom. Hello, I'm Aizawa Shouta, your teacher. Our teacher, Izuku thinks. Aizawa digs into his sleeping bag and pulls out clothing. Izuku blinks, staring at it. Right, let's get to it. Put these on and head outside. You have 10 minutes. Everyone watches as he walks away. A collective hoo is shared by the class, and Izuku's pretty sure he's the most confused. Is this how normal schools operate? Aizawa is waiting outside for everyone once they're finished changing. The locker rooms had been quite embarrassing for Izuku, to say the least. Since he had never gone to school before, the idea of changing in the same room as other boys was odd and slightly embarrassing to him because he wasn't used to it. When the boys had first entered the locker room, Izuku looked around, mostly in confusion. Where are we supposed to change? He asked. Ida had been closest to him when he asked and looked at Izuku with bewilderment. By your locker, Midoriya-kun, he answered. Izuku looked at him as if he had 3 heads. J just out in the open. The boy exclaimed in surprise. Why do you sound so surprised? Surely you changed in the locker room at your old school, right? Ida questioned, confused. Izuku's cheeks turned red in embarrassment as he noticed a few pairs of eyes on him and Ida. He nervously twiddled with his thumbs. I was, homeschooled, so this is actually my first experience at a real school. I'm sorry for assuming, Midoriya-kun. Please excuse me, Ida exclaimed rather loudly. A few more people looked over at them. Aw, it's alright. Izuku is not looking forward to going back to the locker room to change. Anyways, everyone lines up as Aizawa looks at them all. Today, we'll be doing a quirk assessment, he says. A quirk assessment? But what about orientation? 𝗧𝗪𝗢𝗏 questions. If you really wanna make the big leagues, you can't waste time on pointless ceremonies. Here at UA we're not tethered to normal traditions. I am allowed to run this classroom however I see fit. Izuku notices a few people around tense up. You've been taking standardized tests most of your lives, but you never got to use your quirks in physical exams before. The country is still trying to pretend we're all created equal by not letting those with the most power excel. It's not rational. One day the Ministry of Education will learn. Aizawa's eyes drift across everyone to make sure they were still paying attention. His eyes landed on one student in particular. Bakugo, you managed to get the most points on the entrance exam. What was your farthest distance throw with a softball when you were in junior high? Bakugo looks up at the teacher. 67 meters, I think. Right? Try doing it with your quirk. Nodding. Bakugo stepped into the outlined circle that Aizawa had pointed to. Anything goes, just stay in the circle. Izuku watches as Bakugo rolls his shoulder and fires up his quirk. Kaken's quirk really has gotten stronger. It's been a while since I've seen it up close like this. The softball lands in the distance and the recorder in Aizawa's hand goes off. All of you need to know your maximum capabilities. It's the most rational way of determining your potential as a pro hero. The teacher shows the class the number and Izuku stares, eyes wide. Whoa, 705 meters. Are you kidding me? With that, everyone starts talking. Izuku looks around, watching everyone. This looks like fun. I wanna try. One of the girls exclaims. So this looks fun. You have 3 years here to become a hero. You think it's all gonna be games and playtime. Today, you'll participate in 8 physical tests to gauge your potential. Whoever comes in last has none and will be expelled immediately. 𝗧𝗪𝗢𝗢𝗎𝗧. Izuku stares at his teacher in disbelief. Immediate expulsion. 8 tests. Oh crap, not good. I can't afford to rank last. Like I said, I get to decide how this class runs. Izuku watches along with everyone else as Aizawa brushes some bangs out of his face. Without the hair in his face, Izuku can see how bloodshot his eyes are. Understand. If that's a problem, you can head home right now. Izuku's actually doing better than he thought he would do. The first test had been the 50-meter dash. Izuku was careful about how he used one for all during the race. He didn't use the full 5%, but powered enough of his quirk in his legs that would give him more speed. After the dash was a grip strength test. That one hadn't been too hard. He was able to use the full 5% on that test and he placed quite high as well. The third test was the standing long jump and then the repeated side steps, and now there's the ball throw. Izuku goes after 𝗧𝗪𝗢𝗏, who had gotten infinity. He enters the circle and holds the softball in his hands. After this is the distance run, sit-ups, and the seated toe touch. Izuku stares off a bit, thinking about his plan. Should he use more than 5% when he throws the ball? He's been doing well so far and depending on the score he gets from this can only boost his place. With his decision made, Izuku fires up one for all in his arm and throws. He stares in surprise when he suddenly feels the power disappear, and the ball drops to the ground. 46 meters. What? I erased your quirk. Izuku looks over at Aizawa, eyes wide. The judges for this exam were not rational enough. Someone like you should never be allowed to enroll at this school. Wait a second, I recognize those goggles. He's the underground hero, Eraserhead. You're not ready. You don't have enough control over your quirk. Are you planning on breaking your bones again? Counting on someone else to carry you away? No matter what your intentions are, you'll be a liability in battle. Izuku stays silent, clenching his fists. He doesn't say anything because on the one hand Aizawa is right, but on the other, he isn't. Aizawa doesn't know how much Izuku's gone through to control his power. All the teacher probably saw was his performance during the entrance exam and he was judging off of that. Well, Izuku will prove him wrong. He'll prove that he can be depended on and not the other way around. When Aizawa sees that Izuku isn't going to say anything, he sighs. I've restored your impractical quirk. Take your final throw. With that, he walks away. Holding the ball once more, Izuku thinks of a strategy before throwing it again. If he can just concentrate his power in one particular spot, he won't have to worry about breaking his arm. With a determined stare, Izuku pulls his arm back and swings. Just as the ball is about to leave his hand, he uses one of his fingers to propel the ball forwards using one for all. It hurts like hell, but he can still move. After all of the tests are done, the students head back to the locker rooms and change. In the end, no one got expelled. Aizawa had explained that it was a logical ruse to get everyone to do their absolute best. The end of the day comes and Izuku walks out of the building hunched over. "I'm so tired," he mumbles. Who knew school could be so tiring? Someone taps his shoulder and Izuku turns around, startled. "Aw, hey there Ida-kun," he exclaims. "How's the broken finger?" Ida questions. Izuku relaxes and shows Ida the bandaged finger. "Oh, it's doing fine thanks to recovery girl." Ida nods and walks alongside him. "I have to stop relying on the help of others and learn how to control my power, even if it's only at 5%. I was a bit concerned by Aizawa-sensei's approach to class, but I trust the school's judgment. That is the top program. Even so, lying is downright immoral. I thought he was scary, but that's not it. He's just really serious about school." Izuku thinks with a smile. "Hey, wait up you two. Are you going to the station? I'll join you guys." Uraraka calls out as she runs to catch up to Izuku and Ida. "Oh, you're the Infinity Girl," Ida says. Uraraka smiles. "And Uraraka Ochako," she introduces. "Let's see, you're Ida Tenya-kun, and you're Deku-kun, right?" "Midoriya." Izuku tenses as he exclaims, "The Deku." "Yeah, isn't that what Bakugo-kun called you?" she asks. Izuku's sweat drops. "Well, my name is actually Izuku. Kaken calls me that to make fun of me." He hurries to explain. "That's unsportsmanlike." Ida notes, a hand on his chin. Uraraka rubs the back of her head. "Oh, I didn't realize that, I'm sorry." She apologizes. She then smiles. "But you know what, I like Deku-kun. It would make a great hero name. It sounds like you can do it." "You know?" Izuku goes quiet as he thinks. He never thought of his nickname that way. He smiles at her. "I like the sound of that. Deku it is then." Uraraka smiles at him in response. With that, the three students begin their walk to the station. "Oh, Midoriya-kun, if there are any questions you may have about school, feel free to ask me." Ida offers. "I hope today was a good first experience overall for you." "Aw, thank you Ida-kun." Uraraka blinks, looking at them. "Good first experience?" she asks. Izuku nods. "I've never actually been to a real school before. My father homeschooled me," he explains, and the conversation carries on from there. "I could get used to this," Izuku thinks. "Having real friends. But what should I do about father's favor?" Izuku has been in school for a week and he isn't sure what to make of it. He's been learning so many new things about what students do throughout the day. Although, he does find school to be quite weird. He still couldn't get over the whole locker room thing. How can everyone get changed so easily around each other? Izuku can't fathom the thought. Another weird thing is the teachers. Izuku's never been so close to so many pro heroes before, but he didn't think all of them were so wacky. One of the wackiest teachers was definitely Aizawa. The man always looked dead on his feet. It was almost worrying. Besides how weird the teachers are, Izuku finds the concept of friends even weirder. Uraraka and Ida are very different than the friends he had had in the past. Although, maybe using Kaken as a comparison isn't the best idea. Anyways, Izuku is already starting to grow fond of his friends. It's slightly alarming. His father's favor rings in the back of his head constantly. He isn't quite sure what to do about it until an idea strikes him. He decides to only tell his father about certain quirks, ones like Ojiro's tail and Hagakura's invisibility, Kuta's Anavoice too. When his father asks about any other quirks his classmates had, Izuku decides to lie and tell him that there aren't any others that are interesting. Thankfully, his father never appears to be skeptical. Izuku loves Yua though. In the morning he sits through English lessons by Present Mike and learns math from ectoplasm. It's amazing. He never thought he'd be learning from pro heroes. The afternoon, however, is the most interesting. That's when he gets hero lessons. So when the class sees All Might enter the classroom with a cry of, "I am here," coming through the door like a normal person, Izuku feels a small bubble of excitement. Izuku hears how excited everyone is as they cheer. For today's activity, we'll be doing battle training. Battle training, Izuku thinks as he stares at his mentor. "And for that you need these," All Might exclaims. The class looks around in confusion as cabinets pop out from the walls. "In accordance with the Quirk registry and the special request forms you filled out before being admitted." He trails off and the class basically explodes. "Hell yeah. Costumes," they cheer. Izuku can't help but nervously hug his backpack to his chest. After you change, come out in ranking order to ground beta. Izuku stands from his seat and follows everyone to their costumes. He looks for his number and his heart flutters in his chest when he sees it. He grabs the case and follows the boys to the locker room. He makes sure to change as quickly as possible and then he follows everyone out. Looking good is very important, ladies and gentlemen. Look alive now, because from today on, you're all heroes. All Might exclaims when they enter ground beta. Izuku looks around at everyone's costumes with awe. 𝗧𝗏 and Iida approach him. Whoa, your costume is so cool, Deku-kun. The girl exclaims. Izuku tugs on his gloves a bit with a small smile. Iida hurriedly nods in agreement. Yes, it's quite eye-catching. He compliments as his hand makes chopping motions. Izuku chuckles a bit. The costume he was wearing was a design he thought of when he was younger. The original idea was supposed to be a homage to All Might, which is why it has two bangs attached to his mask, and why his mouth guard looks like a smile. However, before submitting his costume outline, Izuku altered it. In the original design, he had two white strips of fabrics on his sides and his arms. Now, the color was black. He also had knee pads, but now those pads covered his legs and stopped at his thighs. Lastly, his mask attaches to his mouth guard now. His gloves also has a different design to them. Two blue stripes wrap around the end of them. Your costumes are cool too, Izuku exclaims. 𝗧𝗏 laughs a bit, rubbing the back of her head. I should have been more specific on my request form. My costume is kind of embarrassing, she admits. It fits your aesthetic pretty well, 𝗧𝗏-san. The astronaut look suits you, Izuku says, reassuringly. 𝗧𝗏 smiles at him as Iida agrees. And Iida-kun, you look so cool. Like a knight. Thank you, Midoriya-kun. Everyone, here's today's training exercise, indoor anti-personnel battle training. All Might exclaims, catching everyone's attention. Villain battles are most commonly seen outdoors, but statistically the most heinous villains are more likely to appear indoors. You'll be split into villain teams and hero teams, and you'll be facing off in 2-on-2 indoor battles. So no basic training. Asui questions. All Might pauses. Practical experience teaches you the basics. He explains. The distinction here is that you won't be fighting disposable robots. The minute he finishes talking, everyone begins asking questions, speaking over each other. Izuku can't help but feel bad. He watches as All Might answers their questions and finishes explaining the training. For the exercise, the villains will be guarding a fake bomb in one of the buildings. Both teams will be given capture tape to immobilize their opponent. The heroes win if they wrap the villains in capture tape, or touch the bomb before time is up. All Might has everyone draw lots to decide who their partners will be. Everyone goes one at a time and Izuku ends up getting paired with 𝗧𝗏. Oh, nice. I can't wait to work with you, Deku-kun. The girl exclaims. Izuku manages a smile, her cheerfulness a bit overwhelming. Up first are the hero team A and the villain team D. All Might exclaims and Izuku's eyes go wide. He and 𝗧𝗏 are team A, that means he's up against Kaken. The villain team goes in first. The timer starts in 5 minutes when the hero team sneaks in. The rest of us will watch via CCTV. With that, the training begins. Izuku and 𝗧𝗏 stand outside the building and work on a strategy. The building blueprints, 𝗧𝗏 says, holding them. We better memorize these. Izuku nods in agreement. Any ideas yet, Deku-kun? She asks, looking over at him. He shakes his head. 𝗧𝗏-san, can you tell me more about your quirk? It might help me come up with something. The boy inquires. Sure, 𝗧𝗏 agrees. Whatever I touch with the pads on my fingers causes it to float. It'll float until I release it, but if I float too many things at once I get super sick. Izuku hums. Knowing Kaken, he'll probably target me first, which'll give you an opening to sneak past him and get to Iida and the weapon. Ochako watches as he mumbles plans under his breath. Is he not nervous? Even though there's no punishment for failing like there was with Aizawa, Ochako is still a bit nervous. From what she knows about Deku, he seems like a walking ball of anxiety, but he doesn't seem a bit anxious right now. He seems confident, so confident that it's as if a whole different person is standing beside her. I got it. Deku turns to Ochako with a small smile. She can't help but smile back. What's the plan, Deku-kun? Izuku and 𝗧𝗏 are quiet as they walk through the hallways of the building. There's a lot of blind corners, so they have to watch out. Izuku's not sure where Kaken will come from to attack. 𝗧𝗏 looks around the halls as they walk, following Izuku's lead. The boy is almost shocked by how much the girl already trusts him. Even though I have a good grasp on one for all, I have to be careful. I've never really used it against anyone except All Might and Father before. All we've got is my natural strength and 𝗧𝗏-san's zero gravity. That should be good enough to win. Izuku knows how Kaken is. That's why he's keeping such a close eye on the whole space as he's mentally referring back to his notes on indoor scenarios. Suddenly, Kaken leaps in front of them, startling the two. Kaken uses his right arm to punch Izuku as he fires off an explosion. Izuku pushes Uraraka down and out of the way of the blast. "Are you alright, Uraraka-san?" he exclaims. "Yeah, thanks. He came out of nowhere," the girl replies. Kaken's form comes out of the smoke and Izuku pushes himself up, standing in front of Uraraka almost protectively. "Nice dodging, Deku." Kaken practically growls. "I had a feeling that you'd come right for me," Izuku says, frowning. Kaken has a crazed gleam in his eye as he throws his arm back, exclaiming, "I'll mess you up just enough not to be disqualified." Izuku smirks a bit, already knowing what's coming. Just as Kaken thrusts his arm out to attack, Izuku latches onto it and flips him over his shoulder. He hears Kaken groan as he lands on the ground. "If your move wasn't as obvious as it was, you probably would have landed that hit. But I know enough about you to know you almost always lead with that right hook." Kaken pushes himself up to turn and glare at Izuku. The boy isn't fazed by it, and that surprises Kaken. "I'm not going to be your punching bag anymore. I've learned how to fight back and I'm going to take you down." Kaken growls in frustration. "What the fuck are you spouting from that mouth of yours, Deku? You're pissing me the hell off." Izuku holds his fists up to fight, face set in determination. "The meaning of that name of yours, it's changed. I'm not some loser that's worthless to you anymore. Deku is the name of a hero who never gives up." Izuku's back is to Uraraka, so he misses the way her eyes widen at his exclamation. Kaken growls again and suddenly goes quiet for a few seconds. "Shut up and keep watch. I'm ready to wreck someone," he exclaims, and Izuku guesses he's talking with Ida. He blinks and Kaken is using his explosions to push himself up into the air. "Uraraka-san, go on ahead of me," Izuku exclaims as Kaken kicks him. "Worry about yourself," Kaken shouts as the girl runs off. "Don't worry." Izuku looks up at him and that's when Kaken sees it. The white capture tape around his knee. "I am." Izuku uses the tape to fling Kaken a few inches away from him. It doesn't do much, but at least it gives Izuku room to breathe. "If I know Kaken, he'll probably rage and try to attack me again." Just as he predicts, Kaken uses his right hook to try and explode Izuku. The boy ducks out of the way. He lands in a crouched position, mind scrambling for a plan. "Right now I have no plan to beat just Kaken. I gotta come up with a strategy." Izuku takes off, running behind a corner. "Get back here, Deku," Kaken calls as Izuku runs for cover. "It must have been fun, huh? Tricking me into believing you were some weakling. Right? You've been hiding that flashy quirk for years, haven't you?" Izuku hears the crackle of Kaken's explosions. "Bring it on, nerd. I'll still crush you." Ignoring Kaken for now, Izuku crouches beside a corner. "He came straight for me, ignoring Uraraka-san entirely. Just like I guessed, Ida-kun is probably guarding the weapon, which means there's probably no teamwork between them at all. This is just Kaken rampaging all on his own then. If both of them had come for us then we probably wouldn't have had any chances of winning. If I hadn't sent Uraraka-san ahead we would have wasted too much time." Izuku wipes some sweat from his cheek. "This is good then. As long as Uraraka-san can go after the weapon and capture Ida, I'll finish things up here and join up with her and take out Ida-kun." Izuku's communicator crackles as he hears Uraraka speak. "Deku-kun, Uraraka-san, what is it?" "Ida-kun found me. I'm sorry." "It's alright. This could still work. Keep him distracted." "Okay. I'll be up to you soon." "Okay. I trust you, Deku-kun." Izuku stands up, a small warm feeling budding in his chest. He can't let Uraraka down. She was counting on him. "I need a plan." "Think. What would father do?" There's footsteps from the other end of the hallway. Izuku turns and sees Kaken standing there. "I'm loaded up," he says, holding up his gauntlet. "Why don't you use your quirk?" he asks when he spots Izuku taking out the capture tape. "You mocking me, Deku? It's now or never," Izuku thinks as he narrows his eyes. "Mocking you? You must be crazy, Kaken. I've been looking up to you for years. You've been the one mocking me." Kaken growls at him and thrusts out his arm. "I'm guessing you know this from your stalking, but the sweat glands on my palms secrete something like nitroglycerin. That's how I make my explosions." His hand moves to the pin on his gauntlet. "Assuming they honored my design requests, this gauntlet's been storing that sweat." "Young Bakugo, stop. Are you trying to kill him?" All Might exclaims through the earpieces. "He won't die if he dodges." The hothead shouts, yanking the pin. Izuku's blinded by the bright light from the explosion and can only hear the loud bang as he gets pushed back. Smoke fills his vision as he lands on the ground, wincing. Eventually the smoke clears and Kaken is looking down at his gauntlets in awe. "They gave someone like you something like that," Izuku shouts once he can talk. I wanna crush you, nerd. Use your quirk, he demands as Izuku pushes himself up. An explosion he can direct forward. I guess he wanted a way to attack at range. Izuku pants as he pushes himself up. 𝗧𝗧𝗏-san, how's it going on your end? He asks. I'm not sure how much longer I can distract Ida-kun, Deku-kun. He got rid of all the debris so I can't float anything. Izuku frowns. Just stay calm. Stick to what you know, trust yourself. Kaken scoffs. You ignoring me? He asks, ignoring All Might's scolding. It's time to beat you, he exclaims, using his explosions to soar into the air. He aims straight for Izuku and Izuku clenches a fist, powering up one for all. At the last second, Kaken's above him and then behind him, firing an explosion at his back. Izuku is pushed forward a bit but not much. He channels one for all to his leg and twists his body to kick Kaken away. His attack lands and he's able to kick out one of Kaken's legs from beneath him. Kaken's balance, however, is nearly perfect and he uses his right hand to knock his gauntlet into Izuku's side. Izuku yelps in pain, using some of one for all to get away from Kaken. I wonder, Deku, how long were you laughing behind my back? Did you enjoy looking down on me? Did you think I'd never find out you were hiding your quirk from me? Kaken shouts and Izuku can hear the hurt in his voice. Oh no, he didn't have the right to be hurt. Izuku clenches his fist and runs forward, punching Kaken right in the face. Are you blind or just stupid? He shouts, anger written all over his face. Never once have I lied to you, Kaken. Ever since we were kids, I've looked up to you, but you never deserved it. Using one for all, Izuku lands another hit as he dodges a right hook from Kaken. You kicked me down and made me feel worthless. Even if I was hiding this quirk, you have no right to feel betrayed. You're just a self-centered, arrogant jerk who can't accept that I'm your equal. Bakugo's face falls as he freezes. He begins to shake as he clenches his fists in anger. What the fuck are you talking about, you quirkless wannabe? His hand moves towards his unused gauntlet and Izuku pulls out the capture tape. Bakugo was so blinded by his rage that he leaves an opening, and Izuku sees it. As Bakugo goes to pull the pin, Izuku boosts himself with his quirk and is able to wrap the capture tape around Bakugo's midsection, missing the blast that rips through the wall of the building. Bakugo is pushed to the ground by Izuku, capture tape tightly wound around him. All that can be heard is the heavy breathing of the two. Izuku is standing above Bakugo, trying to catch his breath. It's over. I beat you. Bakugo's eyes widen. Izuku moves so that he starts walking away, ready to go help 𝗧𝗧𝗏. He stops walking to turn back and look at his once childhood friend. I was always amazed by you, Bakugo. That's why I wanted to beat you, to prove to myself and to everyone else that I can do this. With that, he walks away, leaving not only his childhood friend, but their shared history behind. After he beat Bakugo, Izuku went to help 𝗧𝗧𝗏 take care of Ida. Their fight had been a bit sloppy with both Izuku and 𝗧𝗧𝗏 being tripped repeatedly by Ida, and Izuku face-planting when trying to land a hit on the boy. He was incredibly fast, Izuku would give him that. With just a few seconds to spare, Izuku managed to distract Ida long enough for 𝗧𝗧𝗏 to come up with a plan and wrap him in capture tape. To say the least, Izuku and 𝗧𝗧𝗏 were incredibly happy with how well they did. Izuku could tell All Might was proud of him too, which made his heart clench for some reason. Once their battle was done, Izuku was able to watch his classmates, and he was amazed by them, to say the least. They definitely had quirks that his father would love to know about, but Izuku couldn't tell his father about them. He still hasn't worked out why his father needs information on everyone's quirks, but a part of Izuku told him to hold some information back. So he did. At the end of the school day, Izuku walked to the train station with Ida and 𝗧𝗧𝗏. He saw Bakugo walking alone, hands stuffed into his pockets and back hunched over. He looked defeated. Izuku ignored him. He said his piece, and now it was up to Bakugo to do whatever he wanted to do next. The next few days were uneventful, save for the day the media broke into the school. Earlier in the day, Aizawa had told them to pick a class representative and Izuku won the election somehow. Full of nerves and anxiety, he stood beside Yaoyorozu and said a few words. After, they went to lunch. That's when the chaos broke out. A blaring alarm rang throughout the cafeteria, and the students were told to evacuate. With everyone panicking, no one realized it was just the press, who were no real threat. Ida, thankfully, had taken notice of who the intruders were and was able to calm everyone down. When they got back to class, Izuku decided to give his position to Ida. The boy seemed much more fitting for the role than he did. Izuku had a feeling Ida would take his job very seriously. Letting out a quiet sigh, Izuku stares out the window as the scenery rolls by. For the class's hero training today, they were doing rescue training, so they were going on a bit of a field trip. Izuku isn't sure how it happened, but he was seated next to Todoroki. The other boy was quiet, saying nothing, even when he noticed who was next to him. Izuku had given him a timid wave before turning his attention to the window. From where he's sitting, he hears Ida stressing over how the bus's seats messed up his seating chart. Izuku also hears Kaminari and the Sui poking fun at Bakugo, and Izuku was surprised at how the explosive teen hadn't blown their heads off just yet. I never got a chance to tell you, Midoriya, but your quirk is amazing, Kirishima exclaims, snapping Izuku's attention from the window over to the boy. Izuku stammers. My quirk isn't that great, Kirishima-kun. He quickly rebuts, wavering his arms. Come on man, you can do a lot of great stuff with it. It's super flashy too, Kirishima argues. He hardens the skin on his arms as he slams his knuckles together. I'd love to have a quirk like that. Mine is kinda boring and simple. Izuku shakes his head wildly, the timid air around him gone, replaced by confidence. Your quirk is definitely pro level, and even though all you can do is harden your skin, I'm sure there's a lot of different ways you can apply your abilities to situations you may find yourself in. He explains with a smile. If we're gonna talk pro level, I'm sure Todoroki and Bakugo are already one step ahead of all of us. Kaminari comments. Izuku is the only one to take notice of Todoroki tensing up at the mention of his name. Though, Bakugo probably has to work on an attitude adjustment if he wants to stand a chance as a pro. Kaminari quips with a sly smile. What was that, Pikachu? Izuku winces as Bakugo starts yelling. Before he can carry on for too long, the bus pulls to a stop and Aizawa is telling everyone to get off of the bus. When they enter the building, Izuku immediately takes notice of the different areas. There's a large forest, a shipwreck, large rocks piled together that look like a mountain, and even an area with fire. Welcome to the U.S.J, a voice exclaims. Izuku and his class look over to the source and they see a spacesuit. Izuku recognizes them as the Space Hero 13. He holds back his outburst once he recognizes them, but there's a smile of excitement on his face. He hears a cheer beside him and sees Uraraka barely able to contain her own outburst. It seems like she's a fan of theirs as well. Aizawa walks over to 13, looking around. Where's All Might? He asks. I thought he was meeting us here. Izuku's eyes drift over to the two, hearing a bit of their conversation. It seems he just about reached his limit during his way to the school. 13 replies, holding up 3 fingers. Izuku immediately knows what that means. This is so cool, right Deku-kun? Uraraka exclaims, pulling Izuku's attention away from Aizawa and 13. Yeah, he agrees as Aizawa turns his attention back to them. Let's get started then, he says. Before we do, I have 1 or 2 points. Or 3, maybe 4. Okay, I have a lot of points. They ramble. As I'm sure many of you are aware, my quirk is called Black Hole. It can suck in and tear apart anything, and you've used it to save people in all sorts of disasters, Izuku says before he can stop himself. 13 nods. Right, however my power could easily kill. I've no doubt there are some among you with similar abilities. In our superpowered society, the use of quirks is heavily restricted and monitored. It may seem that this system is a stable one, but we must never forget that it only takes one wrong move with an uncontrollable quirk for people to die. During Aizawa's physical fitness test, you came to learn of your own hidden potential. Through All Might's battle training, you experienced the danger that your respective quirks can pose to others. This class will show you a new perspective. You will learn how to utilize your quirks to save lives. Your powers are not meant to inflict harm. I hope you leave here today with the understanding that you're meant to help people. 13 bows. That is all. Thank you for listening. Izuku hears his classmates cheer around him and he can't help but smile. 13 was inspiring, that was for sure. Great, Aizawa says, making everyone look over at him. First off, he trails off, pointing somewhere. He stops talking when the lights flicker slightly and there's a sound of an electrical current from above them. Kaminari, that wasn't you, right? Jiru asks. No way. Kaminari denies quickly. Izuku looks around and sees a portal opening above the central plaza of the U.S.J. His eyes widen as he realizes whose portal that is. What is Kurogiri doing here? Why is he opening a portal? He thinks as Aizawa shouts something to 13. He sees his teacher putting on his goggles and turning to run just as Shigaraki's head pops out of the portal, along with other villains. Izuku stares, confused. Why was Shigaraki here at UA? He doesn't have much time to think about any possible answers, for Kurogiri appears in front of Izuku and his class. 13 and Eraserhead is it? According to the information I received the other day, All Might is supposed to be here. Izuku feels dread in the pool of his stomach. He was the reason Kurogiri knew that. He had informed his father about the trip to the U.S.J they were taking. He was excited to get more training and couldn't stop talking about it when his father asked him more questions. This was happening all because of him, wasn't it? Aizawa mutters something under his breath as he runs into the fray, pulling at his bandages. Izuku's classmates huddle together, but he's too involved in his head to pay attention to what they were saying. Isn't there intruder sensors? Ieyasu exclaims. Yes, of course there are. 13 replies. Are they only here, or are they at the main building as well? Either way, if the sensors aren't working, it has to be thanks to one of their quirks. Todoroki mumbles, staring at the villains pouring in. This place is far from the campus, and they picked a time when there'd be fewer people here. So maybe they're not as dumb as they seem. They must have an objective, because this is a well-coordinated sneak attack. Todoroki-kun, this is no time to evaluate the enemy. Follow after 13 and evacuate. Ida calls, and everyone begins following their teacher. Kirigiri moves to block their path. I won't allow that, he says. Greetings. We are the League of Villains. Forgive our audacity, but today we've come here to U.A. High School to end the life of All Might, the symbol of peace. Izuku's eyes widen in horror. We were under the impression that All Might would be here today, but it seems his schedule was revised. Kirigiri sighs. Well, no matter. My role remains unchanged. The blast mist coming from his body surrounds them, and Izuku has a bad feeling about what was about to happen. Before anything can happen though, Kirishima and Bakugo leap in of Kirigiri. Bakugo powers up an explosion as Kirishima hardens his fist and punches at him. Betcha didn't see that coming. Kirishima exclaims. That was close, yes. Students though you may be, you are certainly the best of the best. Kirigiri replies, truly caught off guard. No, both of you, get back. 13 exclaims. Kirigiri's mist traps them in a hemisphere of black. Now, begone. Guys. Izuku shouts as a portal opens beneath him. He yelps as he falls through the portal. When he lands on dirt. Izuku quickly pushes himself up, looking around at where he was. It looks like a landslide. He murmurs, standing up. From the corner of his eye he sees movement and dodges in time to avoid a punch. Powering up one for all, Izuku punches the villain that was there, knocking them out. That's when Izuku sees a group of villains and realizes the strategy that Kirigiri had. Divide and conquer, he murmurs, putting a hand on his chin. Taking Izuku's moment of distraction as an opening to attack, a few villains jump out of hiding and leap for Izuku. Before Izuku can move out of the way, the villains jump into a wall of ice. Izuku yelps as he jumps back in surprise. He turns and sees Todoroki is the one responsible for the wall of ice that appeared. Todoroki-kun, he exclaims, glad that he isn't alone in the zone they were in. Midoriya, the other boy says, nodding. He walks over to him, keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. You should be more careful during situations like this. It could be dangerous, he says. Right? Izuku agrees. He thinks back to what Kirigiri said before. They were there to kill All Might. Why? Why now of all times? Izuku's head is all over the place. He can't think straight. All he can think about is how this is all happening because of him. What can he do to fix this mess? Midoriya, the villains are breaking through my ice. Back away from it. Todoroki commands. Izuku numbly nods and backs away. He's just in time too, for the villains break through as soon as he backs away. Todoroki slams his right foot down, freezing the villains. This terrain is perfect for my ice. It's as if that mist guy just randomly dropped us without knowing about our quirks. A light bulb goes off in Izuku's mind. That's right. He didn't tell his father about all of his classmates' quirks. He had no idea about Todoroki or Bakugo, or Ida, or Uraraka's quirks when planning this attack. Izuku's class could still turn things around. Todoroki-kun, that's it. Izuku exclaims. They don't know about our quirks. What does that have to do with anything? Todoroki asks. Their strategy was to scatter us. If we want to get out of this zone, we have to figure out a strategy to stop them. Izuku says. Todoroki opens his mouth to refute, but Izuku stops him before he can say anything. You can't use your ice to overwhelm them forever. We could be on a time limit and you'll probably freeze your body before we even finish with these guys. He says. I guess you have a point. He mumbles. What's the plan then? Todoroki asks him. Izuku takes a few minutes to think. How fast can you produce ice? He asks. Todoroki blinks, thrown off by the question. I can do it in a few seconds. Why? The boy questions. If you can create enough ice to slide us out of this zone, I'll use my quirk to give us a speed boost. It might not be much, but it should work. Izuku explains. Todoroki is quiet, thinking through the plan. Eventually, he nods in agreement. Let's do it. He agrees. Izuku nods in response and goes to stand behind Todoroki. He begins to power up one for all in his legs. On the count of 3, Izuku says, watching as the villains begin to unfreeze. He feels the air around them begin to chill and looks down at the ground, where ice is forming around Todoroki's feet. 1, he says, seeing more of the villain begin to unfreeze. 2, the now unstuck villains begin to charge for them. 3, he exclaims and pushes Todoroki. The ice beneath their feet gives them more momentum and they're pushing through the crowd of villains quite quickly. Izuku ignores the cries of surprise around them and focuses on pushing Todoroki. He sees the end of the landslide zone in front of them and feels a small bit of relief fill him. They were close to escape. They were suddenly pushed apart by a villain, interrupting their path. Both Izuku and Todoroki grunted as they fell. "Haha, you kids are smart," the villain says. "Too bad I was here to interrupt you. Maybe you would have been able to escape unharmed." He chuckles. "But you two were very unlucky to have run in." The villain is cut off as Todoroki freezes him up to his neck. He stands up, walking over to the now frozen villain, looking at him with unmoving eyes. "Forgive me for saying so, but it's hard to see you as any more than a thug with a quirk you can't handle." Todoroki stares at him, sighing. Since his breath was so cold, Izuku actually saw it. How much ice had the boy already used? "Bastard, are you really just a kid?" "Oh, the villain cries out. Todoroki just scoffs. "You're an adult, for God's sake. Act like it," he mumbles. "At this rate, your skin will probably rot away from frostbite." "But I'm trying to become a hero, and heroes don't do such horrible things." He leans down toward the villain, eyes steely and cold. Izuku watches the entire scene in awe. "What makes you think you can kill All Might?" he asks, and Izuku feels that fear again. There was a chance that All Might could have died today. The very thought of it terrified Izuku. Logically, he knew the chance of All Might dying was very improbable, but he knew that the 𝗧𝗫 wasn't a god. He was just as human as everyone else. He wasn't indestructible, no matter how much Izuku wanted to think he was. His thoughts fall silent as he listens to the villain speaking with Todoroki about how the League planned to kill All Might. When Izuku and Todoroki arrive at the central plaza, All Might is there, being held in the air by 2 clawed hands digging into his sides. It seems they get there just as Bakugo and Kirishima do. Bakugo fires off an explosion, hitting Kurogiri. Todoroki slams his foot down and freezes the large black body half in the portal. Bakugo is holding down Kurogiri by the metal around his neck, which cuts off the portal the body was trapped in. "You're not all that, you misty bastard," Bakugo growls, glaring down at Kurogiri. "Scum like you could never kill the symbol of peace." Todoroki mumbles, steely eyes staring down the villains in front of them. All Might takes the opportunity to leap away from the thing holding him, and Izuku finally gets a good look at it. Its face is somewhat bird-like, its brain exposed. Izuku also catches sight of Shigaraki standing there. He can't help but feel mixed emotions seeing him there. "You've pinned down our way out." "Well, this is a problem," Shigaraki mumbles. "You slipped up, you bastard," Bakugo exclaims. "And it's just like I thought. The parts you can turn into that foggy warp gate are limited, and you're using that misty crap to hide your real body. Yeah, am I right?" He's met with silence. "If your whole body was mist and physical attacks didn't work, you'd never say that was close." Kurogiri tries to move, but Bakugo stops him. "Not only have you beaten our level, but you're at full health. Today's kids really are something. Our League of Villains should be ashamed." Izuku feels himself tense up as Shigaraki's eyes drift over to him. He then looks back at the bird thing on the ground. "Namu, take out the explosive brat. We need our escape route back." Shigaraki commands and the Namu gets up. His body's falling apart, but he's still moving. Izuku exclaims, "Get back everyone." All Might throws his arm out. "What the? I thought his quirk was shock absorption. I don't remember saying that's all he can do. This is hyper-regeneration. Namu is a superpowered living sandbag, designed to withstand everything you've got." The Namu suddenly propels himself toward All Might, punching him backwards. The Namu then charges for Bakugo and Izuku's moving before he can think about it. He's standing in front of Bakugo, pulling his arm back and punching as hard as he can. He bites back a cry of pain when he feels his arm breaking from the pure power his punch held. The Namu is unfazed and the two boys are pushed out of the way just in time. Izuku blinks and looks around, seeing himself beside Todoroki. "What the?" Izuku exclaims and looks over to where he had just been standing. All Might was in both his and Bakugo's place. Izuku's eyes widen. All Might had taken the hit for the both of them. "Anything to save a comrade, huh?" Shigaraki mutters. "Violence in the name of saving others is admirable, isn't it, hero?" "You know what, All Might? That pisses me off. Heroes and villains both thrive on violence, but we're still categorized. You're good, you're evil. That's how it is. Shigaraki's arms spread out as he speaks. Symbol of peace. In the end, you're just a tool for violence, made to keep us down. Violence only breeds more violence. I'll show the world that by killing you. What an idealist you are. Idealistic criminals have a different sort of fire in their eyes, and yours don't have that fire. You're just enjoying yourself, you big liar. All Might says, frowning. You saw right through me. Shigaraki chuckles dryly. Let's clear the game and go home, he exclaims and lunges for Izuku and the others. He's coming, get ready guys, Kirishima exclaims, and Izuku briefly wonders if Shigaraki would actually kill him. Shigaraki stops running though when he sees All Might and the 𝗵𝗄 fighting. A head-on assault, Izuku exclaims, watching as All Might's fists are met with the 𝗵𝗄's. The amount of force between the two is incredible. It's creating wind so fierce that it's blowing Izuku's curls all over the place. While fighting with the 𝗵𝗄, Izuku sees All Might spitting up blood. He's at full power. He's throwing it all out there. Every hit is the real deal. Over 100% of his power. Just like Izuku, Todoroki, Bakugo, and Kirishima are watching as All Might uses so much of his power that he ends up sending the 𝗵𝗄 into the sky, breaking the ceiling of the U.S.J. The smoke clears up while everyone is staring in shock. Izuku looks over at his mentor, eyes wide. Well, villain, how about we finish this up? He asks. Shigaraki growls. He's not weak at all. They lied to me. Izuku has a feeling he knows exactly who they are. The only question is why his father thought that All Might was weaker. He hadn't told his father who he got his quirk from. Hadn't even told him the quirk's name. So why? If you can take me on, then bring it. All Might shouts. Let's get out of here, we're not ready for this yet. Todoroki suggests. Midoriya, we ought to hang back for now. Rush in and they might take you hostage or something, Kirishima says, but Izuku isn't listening. He's too focused on All Might. He's bluffing. It's mixed in with the dust cloud, but that looks like the steam when he's transforming. Kurogiri materializes beside Shigaraki. If only we still had 𝗵𝗄. If only. He was taking those hits so well. Shigaraki whines. Shigaraki Tamura, calm yourself. It's apparent that 𝗵𝗄 did manage to deal some real damage. The children are holding back, and reinforcements from the school are bound to arrive in a few minutes. If the two of us work together, we still have a chance. Shigaraki scratches at his neck. Right. We can do this. The final boss is standing right here. Meanwhile, everyone is walking back beside Izuku. Kirishima's voice is distant as Izuku's stuck in his own head. I'm the only one who knows about All Might, but it's Kurogiri and Shigaraki. There's no chance they'll hold back against me, and if they do, it'll look suspicious. What do I do? Kurogiri and Shigaraki take off, charging for All Might. This is revenge for 𝗵𝗄. Kurogiri expands his mist, the portal expanding in front of All Might. Holy crap, the hero shouts. For the second time that day, Izuku's moving before he can think. He's in the air, legs broken from the amount of power he used, and the only one who knows the trouble All Might's in. Izuku sees Shigaraki's eyes widen. Izuku aims for Kurogiri, his arm channeling his quirk. I have to aim for his real body, that'll smash him away. Get away from All Might, he cries out. Before he could land the hit, there was a bang and a bullet hit Shigaraki's arm that extended toward All Might. A few more bullets are fired and they hit Shigaraki while passing through Kurogiri's mist. Izuku lands on the ground, feeling nothing but pain. He looks up and sees the pro heroes standing at the entrance. They're here. When Izuku wakes up, he's laying in a bed beside All Might. He looks around the room, confused about how he got there. Wasn't he at the U.S.J? He sits up, wincing slightly. Recovery girl looks over at him. I see you're awake, dear, she says. Izuku glances over to All Might, feeling relief. He then looks down and sees that his arm is bandaged, an IV drip attached to it. The situation being what it was. I can't scold you two this time, she sighs. I think I've probably shortened my time limit again. I'll be lucky if I still get an hour a day. All Might admits, and all Izuku can feel is guilt. This is his fault. All Might, he mumbles. I'm sorry, I couldn't do anything to help you. Izuku apologizes, frowning. That's not true. The hero refutes. If you hadn't jumped in when you did, I'd have been dead. All Might turns his head to look at Izuku, giving the boy a smile. You saved me again, young Midoriya. Izuku smiles at All Might in response, but he still feels the guilt sitting in the pit of his stomach. A police officer enters the room and Izuku falls quiet, tuning out the conversation between the officer and All Might in favor of thinking about the events that had just transpired. Classes were cancelled the next day, but the students of WhatIf couldn't rest easy. The teachers were discussing what happened, and the students were recovering, all except one. Izuku sits in front of his father, head low. His father sits in front of him in his wheelchair, arms crossed. He doesn't have to look up at the man to see that he's disappointed. Izuku, the man begins. Let me ask you a question. Is there a particular reason why you kept information from me? Izuku tenses, afraid to answer. He's scared of what his father will do if he does answer. Shall I repeat the question, Izuku? His father asks. Why did you keep information from me? What information are you talking about? Izuku asks, trying to keep his voice from trembling. I think you know what information I'm talking about. Izuku doesn't reply. He hears his father's dry chuckle. I thought we were close, Izuku. I didn't think you'd start keeping secrets from me. Why did you attack UA? Izuku asks the question before he can think about it. He finally looks up at his father. Now, that's not fair, is it? Asking me a question when you won't answer mine. His father says, shaking his head. But if you must know, it's because you told me All Might would be there. Izuku tenses, and the guilt comes crashing back, full force. It was a chance to kill the world's symbol of peace. Why waste the opportunity? Izuku bites his lip, nervous. Now, since I've answered your question, be a good boy and answer mine. I didn't. Izuku pauses, trying to formulate his words carefully. I didn't keep any secrets from you, father. His father frowns at him, and Izuku can see the disappointment written all over his face. His father leans forward, reaching his arm out to him. You know, Izuku, I could very easily use my power to pull the information right out of you. Izuku feels a chill run down his spine. He feels sick, and there's something tugging at his brain. He's felt something like this before. It's like an overwhelming sense of pure power. He felt it when he met All Might for the first time. But this feeling didn't feel like All Might's power. It feels like something more sinister. You understand that, don't you? That's why I'm going to give you a choice. Izuku's no longer sitting down in his seat. Instead, he's in someone's arms and he hears the cry of a woman. He looks over at her just in time to watch her fall onto the floor. He sees an arm reach out to her and thinks, whose arm is that? He hears a voice and turns to look at where it was coming from. When he turns, he looks into cold, lifeless eyes. Izuku. He's pulled back to the living room where he sat, his father in front of him. He looks into the man's eyes and sees that same coldness in them. Izuku feels very, very insignificant to the man in front of him. He shuts his eyes and inhales, counting to 10. I'm sorry, father, he begins, looking at him. I didn't think that those quirks were that impressive compared to someone like Shigaraki or Kurogiri. I also took into account their current abilities and their education. I didn't think they were worth telling you about. Izuku explains, hoping his father believes. The man is quiet for a few minutes, thinking. Izuku unconsciously stays as still as possible, feeling that if he moved 1 inch his father wouldn't believe him, and something bad would happen. Finally, his father speaks, I suppose you have a point. Izuku feels the tension leave his shoulders as they sag. But I'd appreciate it if you tell me every little detail next time. We wouldn't want Shigaraki going in unprepared, would we? Izuku shakes his head. You're free to go now, Izuku. Make sure you get some rest. His father rolls his chair closer to Izuku and pats his head. Wouldn't want you to miss school tomorrow. With that, his father leaves the room, leaving Izuku behind. The air in the room is no longer tense, and Izuku can finally breathe, no longer feeling the sinister energy he felt before. He takes a large breath, trying to understand what just happened. Izuku can't believe that his father believed what he told him. The feeling of his father's hands in his hair lingers, and for some reason, Izuku feels sick. The next day at school, Izuku can't focus. He's confused by what happened between he and his father discussed the day before. He can't wrap his head around the way his father acted. And the coldness in his eyes. It confused Izuku. Did he even really know his father? How much had he been told over the years? All of his life, Izuku thought his father was a small-time villain. But maybe he was wrong. He's never thought much about what type of villain the man was, but he saw how cold his eyes became. That coldness usually wasn't found in small-time villains. The sinister energy he felt from his father. Only incredibly powerful villains had that type of power, and for the first time in years, Izuku found himself afraid. Izuku found everyone. Homeroom is about to begin. To your seats, Ida shouts, standing in front of the class. Izuku looks to the front of the room, his friend's antics momentarily distracting him from his thoughts. Thankfully, Ida, you're the only one standing still, Shiro says, and the class rep quiets, clearly embarrassed by the call out. Just as he's walking to his seat, the door to the classroom opens. Warning, Aizawa greets, walking into the room covered head to toe in bandages. Aizawa-sensei. The class shouts, glad to see you doing well, Aizawa-sensei. Ida exclaims. My welfare isn't important, because your fight is far from over, Aizawa says, and the class quiets immediately. Don't tell me, Izuku mumbles. He wasn't ready for more villains to face, not when he was battling his biggest one yet. U.S. Sports Festival is quickly approaching, Aizawa explains, and Izuku feels the tension leave his shoulders. How tense were they? Are you sure this a good idea? We were just attacked by villains, Aizawa-sensei. Minato comments. It's necessary to demonstrate that U.S. crisis management protocols are sound. That's the thinking behind it anyways. Compared to past years, there'll be 5 times the police presence. Anyhow, our sports festival is the greatest opportunity you'll get. It's not an event that can be cancelled over a few villains. Izuku tunes out his teacher, already knowing what the sports festival was about. He doesn't do it on purpose though, it's just that he's incredibly tired and his head is currently an absolute mess. He stayed up late the night before doing research on villains from the past 15 years. The confrontation with his father really bothered him. He wasn't able to rest easy the night before, not when his mind was screaming at him that something was wrong. There was more going on, and Izuku has to know. He has to figure it out. He doesn't realize it, but the bell is ringing and Uraraka is standing beside him. Deku-kun, she asks, waving her hand in front of his face. Deku-kun, she calls. Sorry Uraraka-san. Izuku hastily apologizes, snapping out of his daze. Uraraka looks at him, concerned. Are you alright, Deku-kun? You've been spacey all morning, she asks, worriedly. Yeah, I'm alright, don't worry about me, Izuku replies, giving her a small smile. He glances over at the front of the classroom where Aizawa stands, going through a few papers. He stands up from his desk. I have something I have to ask Aizawa-sensei. I'd feel bad if you missed too much of lunch waiting for me, he says, looking at the girl. Uraraka looks at him with uncertainty before nodding. I'll save a seat for you then, Deku-kun. With that she leaves the room. After Uraraka leaves, Izuku walks over to Aizawa nervously. Aizawa-sensei, Izuku asks, is it okay if I ask you something? Aizawa looks up from his papers. Go ahead. Have there been any major villain fights that happened within the last 10 years that you can remember? He asks, and his teacher gives him an odd look. Not that I can remember, no. All Might has prevented major fights from happening. His teacher answers. From beneath the bandages, Izuku can see his eyes narrow. Why the sudden question about big villain fights, Midoriya? Izuku freezes, not expecting his teacher to ask such a question. It's for my analysis notebook. You never know what type of information you can learn. He lies, and Izuku hates how easy it is for him to do so. Aizawa nods and goes back to his papers. You should hurry up and get to lunch, Midoriya. Right, thank you, sir. The 2 weeks before the sports festival go by in a blink of an eye, and Izuku finds himself standing in the waiting room with his classmates. Some of them are chattering with one another, while others are doing breathing exercises, trying to relax. Izuku is one of them, a hand on his chest as he breathes. He's spent the past 2 weeks researching non-stop about villains, and training with both his father and All Might. Midoriya. Izuku looks over and sees Todoroki standing in front of him, a hand in his pocket. Todoroki-kun. What is it? He asks. Izuku takes note that most of his classmates are looking at them, watching. Objectively speaking, I'm stronger than you, more capable, the boy admits, and it surprises Izuku. After what happened at the U.S.J, they didn't speak much. Is all Izuku can manage, because he knows he's probably as strong as Todoroki. All Might's got his eye on you, doesn't he? Izuku stares at him, feeling a jolt of panic. Now I'm not about to pry into why that is, but I will beat you, Todoroki boldly declares, and Izuku falls quiet. Ooh, a declaration of war from the strongest in the class. Kaminari exclaims, hey man, why pick a fight now? We're about to go on, Kirishima tries to say, putting his hand on Todoroki's shoulder. I really don't care. I'm not pretending to be anyone's friend here. Todoroki interrupts Kirishima, brushing off the boy's hand on his shoulder. The atmosphere is incredibly tense. You aren't the only one going for first place, Todoroki-kun. Izuku cracks a small smile, one full of confidence. He can tell it surprises a few of his classmates. I guess we'll just have to wait and see if you declared war on the right person. His response clearly shocks Todoroki. He can see it on his face. Before anything else can happen, the class is being led out into the stadium. Izuku right in the front, wearing nothing but confidence on his face. Before anything began, Midnight had called up Bakugo as a representative of Class 1A. His speech was short and came off as egotistical, but Izuku knew better. That was Bakugo's way of encouraging himself. He was building up his confidence. Even though the two boys had barely spoken, Izuku knew that Bakugo no longer viewed his classmates as if they were entirely beneath him. It made Izuku happy to see. After Bakugo's speech, Midnight announced the first challenge they'd be doing. It was an obstacle course. The very first obstacle they had to face, though, was tight space. Barely anybody was able to make it through. First it was Todoroki, then it was Bakugo, Kirishima, Yaoyorozu, and other WANA students, Izuku being one of them. He couldn't use much of one for all, but he was able to use enough that gave him a boost. After escaping the tight space of the hallway, they had to face robots, ones that students from the entrance exam had already faced. Izuku had used a metal scrap from a destroyed robot to fight his way through. He couldn't be reckless with his quirk, not yet. A lot of students passed him, and some gave him odd looks when they saw him lugging around scrap metal. Said scrap metal came in handy when Izuku reached the final obstacle. Thanks to 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝐺 commentary, Izuku knew that Bakugo and Todoroki were fighting for first place. He looked down at the minefield and strategized. There were a lot of untouched mines from where he was, and he decided to dig them up and use their explosions to propel him past the other students. He ended up flying above Todoroki and Bakugo and used their shoulders to land safely. He could feel his heart beating rapidly in his chest as he ran for the exit, Bakugo and Todoroki running behind him. Izuku was the one who got first place though. Izuku's original idea had been to team up with 𝗬𝗧𝗏 and 𝗧𝗏, seeing as how with their quirks, they made the perfect teammates for the cavalry battle. However, the only person Izuku was able to team up with was 𝗬𝗧𝗏. He cried tears of relief when she approached him and asked to join teams, thankful she wasn't scared off by the 10 million points he was worth. When they went to 𝗧𝗏, they discovered he teamed with Todoroki, wanting to improve himself. Instead of being disappointed, Izuku gave 𝗧𝗏 a smile and a wish of good luck. After, Izuku found Tokoyami and Hatsune. They were great additions to the team. After the 15 minutes passed, they were relatively safe, until Todoroki went for them. They were able to escape a few times, but then one of Hatsune's inventions broke and they couldn't use their plan of escape. Things were getting close for the two teams, but then 𝗧𝗏 whipped out a special move that gave Todoroki the chance to steal Izuku's headband. When he felt his headband leave his head, Izuku didn't feel panic. It was more of a disappointment than anything. His teammates were depending on him and he failed them. 𝗬𝗧𝗏 ended up pushing them into chasing after their stolen points, and Izuku couldn't have been more grateful. They used everything they could to get the points back, but Izuku had grabbed the wrong headband. The match finished after that, and Midnight announced which teams moved on to the next round. Just as Izuku was about to apologize for letting his team down, Tokoyami told him what he had Dark Shadow do. Using his quirk, Tokoyami was able to grab another headband and it bumped them up, allowing them to advance to the next round. Izuku was so happy that he bursted into tears, thanking his team. After the end of the cavalry battle, Todoroki pulls Izuku aside to talk to him. They're standing in the hallway to a student waiting room, and Todoroki is staring him down. "You wanted to talk?" Izuku asks him, being reminded to the confrontation he had with his father a few weeks ago. "About what?" Todoroki glares at Izuku, and he feels uncomfortable by it. The glare is different than the glares he got from Bakugo. No, Todoroki's glare was similar to that of a wounded animal trying to scare away possible predators. Izuku was unnerved by it. Why would his classmate have such a glare? "You overwhelmed me, so much so that I broke my own pledge," Todoroki says, frowning. It would given him an advantage, but he didn't use his left side. Izuku's eyes drifted down to Todoroki's left hand, currently stuffed in the boy's pocket. 𝗧𝗏, Kaminari, Yaoyorozu, Tokoyami, 𝗬𝗧𝗏. None of them felt it. In that last instant, I was the only one feeling that pressure. Todoroki mumbles, and Izuku can feel his heart beginning to pound harshly in his chest. "What are you saying, Todoroki-kun?" "I felt the same pressure coming from you." Todoroki raises his left hand and holds it out in front of his face. "So, are you All Might's illegitimate child or something?" Izuku's first reaction is to laugh because he so badly wants to. "Sometimes, I wish I was," he wants to say, but he doesn't. Instead, he inhales and looks at Todoroki. "I'm not," he denies. "Although, even if I was his kid, I'd try to deny it, so it may not help prove my point. But no, that's not it." Izuku explains. "So, let me ask you, why would you think that I know that's not it?" Interesting way to phrase it. "There's definitely something you're hiding, I'm sure of it," Todoroki says, narrowing his eyes. "You know, my father is 𝗵𝗃𝗄𝗏, the second greatest hero of all time. So if you're somehow connected to All Might, then all the more reason to beat you." Izuku frowns, but Todoroki continues talking. "My dad, he's a powerful bastard who only thinks of becoming stronger. Yeah, he's gone all out to make a name for himself as a hero, but he's always seen All Might as a roadblock and an eyesore. My father could never beat All Might on his own. So he came up with another plan. "What's this about, Todoroki-kun? Why are you telling me this?" Izuku asks him, not understanding why he of all people was being told this. What did Todoroki have to gain by telling him this? Quirk marriages. You've heard of them, yeah. Todoroki replies, ignoring Izuku's question. Izuku blinks. Yeah. They became a problem a few generations after Quirks appeared. With his wealth and fame, my father made my mother's family agree to the marriage, all to get his hands on her Quirk, raising me as a hero who could exceed All Might, just to fulfill his own ambitions. I hate it, being no more than a tool for that bastard. Todoroki brings a hand to rest over the left side of his face, where his scar is. In every memory I have of her, my mother was always crying. She told me she couldn't bear to look at my left side anymore before she threw scalding water in my face. Izuku's eyes widen as he looks at his classmate, horrified. In short, not using my left side against you was my revenge on him. By rising to the top without using my left side, I'll have denied him everything. Todoroki explains, a dark look in his eyes. Izuku doesn't like that look. It doesn't suit someone like Todoroki. Your connection with All Might, keep it to yourself if you want. Either way, I'll rise above you with just my right side. Sorry for wasting your time. With that, the boy exits the hallway, walking out onto the path back. Izuku watches him for a few minutes. What in the world could I possibly say to him? He's like a protagonist of a comic book, one who has a dark past, but he's trying to do the right thing in spite of it. He thinks, clenching his fists. If he keeps neglecting his left side like this, he's going to run himself into the ground. Todoroki-kun, Izuku calls. I may not have had the same experiences as you, but I know what it feels like to be obsessed with something you really want. It consumes you. Maybe sometimes it gives you false hope that maybe, just maybe, things will work out for once. But denying who you are, that won't help you. It'll only make things worse. Don't do that to yourself. Todoroki stops to turn around and look at Izuku, the wind blowing through his hair. Sounds like you speak from experience. Izuku cracks a small, sad smile, one that doesn't reach his eyes. We all have our own demons. After Izuku's fight with Shinsu, he's sitting in the nurse's office with All Might. Recovery Girl finishes with bandaging the fingers he broke during the match. In the end, he had fallen victim to Shinsu's mind control, but was able to break out of it. He still wasn't sure how he did it, and he had been explaining to All Might what he saw. One of them had your hairstyle. Izuku explains. Could it have been the souls of the people who've inherited One for All? His mentor shudders and looks at him, wide-eyed. What the sounds scary. Izuku stares at All Might in disbelief. What? I was sure you'd know. He exclaims. I have, but I only ever saw them once when I was younger. It's a clear sign that you're getting used to One for All. All Might says, crossing his arms. They're the traces of the Quirk's past bearers. But whatever they are, they can't directly interfere or influence you, nor can you affect them. In other words, that vision wasn't what undid the brainwashing. Your strong will allowed you to see those faces, and as far as Shinsu's brainwashing, you overcame it. Just for an instant, you managed to move that fingertip all on your own. Izuku isn't sure why, but his chest feels warm. He's fighting back a smile from spreading across his face. He can hear the pride in his mentor's voice and it makes him happy to hear. He scratches the back of his head bashfully. Yeah, I'm still not really convinced. He murmurs. For a minute he thinks of his father and he remembers the question he's been meaning to ask his mentor. Oh, that's right. He looks at the hero, All Might. Do you know if there are any heroes here that would remember major villain fights from the past 10 years? He asks. All Might hums in response, putting a hand on his chin. An odd question, young Midoriya, but I believe Endeavor is here today if you'd like to ask him about villain fights. He replies, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, my boy. I know. Izuku replies hastily. I wanted to get information from other heroes to get a different perspective. He explains, and not that I think your perspective isn't important, All Might. It's just that he's cut off by All Might's laughter. I understand, young Midoriya, don't worry. He says, patting Izuku's curls. Izuku looks up at All Might, slightly surprised. He wasn't expecting All Might to pat his head. The action stirred feelings within Izuku, but he didn't feel what he felt when it was his father patting his head. With his father, he felt submissive almost. He felt smaller than his father, but with All Might, he feels warmth, and oddly enough, he feels cared for. Izuku gives All Might a smile and stands up from the chair Recovery Girl had seated him in to bandage his hand. Thank you, he says as he exits the nurse's office. Izuku had returned just in time to see Todoroki fight 𝗧𝗪. It was a quick match, and once again, Izuku saw this look on Todoroki's face and he wanted to do something about it. He wasn't sure why, but the look bothered him. After that match was Kaminari versus a student from Class 1B, Shizaki, and following that was Kirishima and Testu. That had been quite the match. Then there was Ida's match, which had been quite informative. He went up against the same girl that had been a part of Izuku's cavalry team. She spent the whole match advertising her creations and then forfeited once she was done. Lastly, it was Uraraka versus Bakugo. Izuku wasn't worried about Uraraka. He knew she could handle herself quite well. Even though her plan was incredibly risky, he was really proud of her. After the first round matches were done, Izuku headed to his waiting room. He had ran into Bakugo, barely speaking a word to him. Things between them were tense. They hadn't spoken at all since their fight, and all they had done was glare at one another. Izuku hopes Bakugo will get over what happened eventually. He hates the tension between them. He walks to his waiting room, deep in thought. He doesn't see a large flaming man in front of him until the man speaks. "Oh, it's you." Izuku looks up at him, startled. "The Endeavor." He stammers. I'm not sure what you're doing back here, but could I ask you a question?" He asks, and while Izuku can feel the pure power the man has just standing a few feet in front of him, it reminded him a bit of his father, and it was practically terrifying. "What is it?" the hero asks. "Has there been any major villain fights from the past 10 years you can remember?" Izuku asks. "Major villain fights, huh?" Endeavor grumbles. "Of course there's been major villain fights. Some villains I've caught have mentioned something about a boss though." "The boss?" Izuku thinks, already trying to fit the information he received into the information he already learned. He's about to say thank you for the information when Endeavor speaks before he can. "That's quite the quirk you have there, creating such a force with just a flick of your finger. In terms of power, it seems on par with All Might's quirk." Izuku tenses. He's annoyed already by this man. "Funny, they tell you never to meet your idols for a certain reason, huh? If you'll excuse me, sir, I have to get going," Izuku says, turning away from the pro. "My Shadow has a duty to surpass All Might." Izuku can hear the venom spilling from Endeavor's voice, and he wants to punch the hero. He really does. His match against you will prove a valuable test, so give it your all. Put up a good fight against him. The air is filled with tension. Neither of them speak for a few minutes. "That's all I have to say. Sorry for my bluntness. Todoroki-kun isn't a tool for you to use to inflate your ego, and I'm not going to be a stepping stone in the process. Our match, it isn't a test, sir. It's our opportunity to prove ourselves." He pauses. Izuku finds himself thinking back to a few hours ago when Todoroki cornered him in that hallway and told him his past, his motivation. Izuku hadn't been quite sure about what to do or how to help him. But now Izuku knows exactly how to help his classmate. He turns back to look at Endeavor, a smile plastered on his face. "Thank you, Endeavor, for the motivational words." He turns and walks away, leaving the hero behind. He hears the man mutter a surprised "TCH," like any of that was motivational. Izuku walks out onto the arena, facing Todoroki. The smile is no longer on his face. It's replaced with a determined fire in his eyes. Todoroki looks at him. "You ready?" he asks. Izuku doesn't reply, taking a small breath instead. Both of these competitors have won top marks in this festival so far. Present Mike voice booms with excitement. But there's only room for one of these great students in the ring. He builds up suspense for the crowd. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 versus Todoroki. The crowd lets out wild cheers of excitement. A million thoughts are running through Izuku's head. He briefly wonders if his father is watching the festival along with Shigaraki. He wonders if his father will congratulate him when he returns home. Shaking the thoughts away, he uses his left hand to grip his right hand by the wrist. He then holds down his middle finger with his thumb. As soon as this starts, Todoroki-kun will probably fire off an ice blast. There's no telling how big it'll be, so it's best to use full power until I can get a solid strategy against him. Just as Izuku guesses, a large wall of ice is sent his way, towering over him. He flicks his finger, blasting straight through the ice. The pressure blows both boys back a bit, shards of ice flying throughout the arena. "I expected as much," Todoroki says, frowning. Izuku watches as Todoroki creates the same wall of ice again. When the ice is close enough, he flicks another finger. From what I've seen, Todoroki-kun's fights always end in a flash. I haven't learned much from watching him. I'll have to learn while fighting. I'll just observe and look for an opening. Todoroki creates a wall of ice behind him, most likely keeping him from falling out of bounds. Izuku glances down at his fingers. He has 6 shots left. Todoroki clicks his tongue and yet again creates the ice. Izuku flicks a third finger, destroying the ice. Izuku knows what'll happen if he keeps this up. People's quirks are physical abilities. They all have some kind of limit. Use them too much and a person will get tired quickly. Todoroki-kun has to have some kind of limit, so you're trying to stretch the match out. Todoroki comments, creating his ice. Not happening. I'll end this quickly. Damn, Izuku's really starting to get annoyed by how stubborn Todoroki is. He holds his arms out, flicking the fourth finger on his hand. Crap, my hand. It's done. He's momentarily distracted and doesn't realize Todoroki's above him until he feels a punch that sends him flying a few feet. Todoroki creates a mountain of ice that catches his foot. He's too close. Izuku thinks, panicked. In his moment of panic, he sacrifices his whole arm to destroy the ice. When the smoke clears away, Izuku is standing, left arm purple and bleeding. Sorry, All Might. He can't help but think, that's a lot stronger than your earlier attacks. Are you trying to tell me to stay back? He's way more than just his quirk. He's got excellent judgment, execution, mobility. Everything about him is strong. Only defending and dodging. It's taking a toll on you. Izuku looks up at his classmate. He can see the other boy's breath and the small patches of ice forming on his right arm. That's when he realizes it. Todoroki is shivering. Izuku blocks out all of the chatter from the audience, focusing on his next move. Sorry for all of this. I appreciate it though, Midoriya. Thanks to you, he doesn't look too happy. With both hands destroyed, you can't fight anymore. Let's end this. Izuku hears the formation of ice before he sees it. Who says I quote am done? Izuku shouts, using his already broken finger to fire off a blast. The blast sends Todoroki into the block of ice he made, while Izuku stands, hand throbbing with pain. He ignores it. Why go that far? Todoroki exclaims. You're shivering, Todoroki-kun. Izuku says. Quirks are just physical abilities. You must have a limit to how much of that cold you can bear. He exclaims. But then, you could always use your left side to thaw yourself out, right? Izuku's eyes narrow and he glares. Everyone's giving it their all to win, to achieve their goals, to make it to the top. And you're telling me that you're going to win by half-assing it. Give me a break. Look at me, Todoroki-kun. Izuku shouts, and he knows Todoroki can hear how angry he sounds. He clenches his fist tightly. You haven't put a single scratch on me. Stop being afraid of yourself and come at me with everything you've got. What are you planning? Todoroki growls. Everything I've got. He asks, did my bastard father pay you off or something? He suddenly dashes forward and Izuku dashes too. You're pissing me off. Izuku half smirks. You've been pissing me off since lunch, he retorts, ducking low as Todoroki lifts his leg for a kick. Imagine the microwave, don't explode. Using one for all, Izuku lands a hit on Todoroki, punching him in the stomach. His hand explodes with pain, but he can still fight. Todoroki lands on the ground, coughing. He pushes himself back up, holding the area Izuku hit. So now you're on the offensive, he asks. He stomps on the ground, creating ice. It's not just you that's slowing down. Your ice is weaker too. I can't make a fist, Izuku thinks, using his cheek to flick his thumb. It cracks the ice. Why are you doing this for? Todoroki shouts. I have to prove myself to him. Izuku cries out. I have to prove that I'm strong enough to be someone who can protect and defend. That's why I'm giving it everything. Izuku pushes Todoroki back, almost losing his footing. Your experiences. I can't even begin to imagine what all that's like. But I know how it feels to deny who you are. If you become number one without giving it all, then I don't think you're as serious about being number one as you sound. Shut up, Todoroki shouts. Izuku runs forward, punching him once again. I have to surpass you. Todoroki lands on the ground, Izuku still standing. He pants, arms burning with pain. He ignores the burn. He's too focused on making sure Todoroki gets his point. It takes a few seconds, but Todoroki slowly pushes himself up. I'll show my father. Damn it. Did Todoroki not hear a word Izuku just said? It's your power. He screams it. He needs Todoroki to understand. Your quirk, not his. It takes a few seconds, but suddenly the arena is hot and there's a blazing flame in front of him. I thought you wanted to win. Why are you trying to inspire me? Which one of us isn't taking this seriously now? Todoroki says. But I wanna be a hero too. He says it with a strained smile, and Izuku's own smile is blinding. I was getting worried there for a second, Todoroki-kun. I thought I'd have to get creative in order for you to understand what I was trying to say. Izuku says with a grin. What are you smiling about? With those wounds, and in this situation, you must be crazy. Heh, I just might be. Izuku laughs dryly. Todoroki narrows his eyes. It's not problem what happens to you now. The two boys power up as much of their quirks as they can, alerting the teachers. Izuku and Todoroki both take steps forward, and the battle is over within seconds. While sitting in the waiting room, 𝗧𝗪𝗧 looks at his left hand, thoughts racing through his mind. He finds himself thinking of his mother, how much she hated his left side because it reminded her of his father. Stop being afraid of yourself and come at me with everything you've got. It's your power, your quirk, not his. He hears the whistle of a kettle and sees the crazed look in his mother's eyes. How did this happen? I pushed her out of my mind. I tried not think about her. Then that fight with Midoriya. He clenches his fist. Mom. His thoughts trail back to Midoriya, and he remembers the strength and conviction the boy had. It was admirable, almost inspiring. The door kicks open and 𝗧𝗪𝗧 looks over at the person responsible for kicking it open. Deku stands there, surprise visible on his face. Hey, what the hell are you doing in here? He asks. His eyes trail over to the sign by the door. This is my space too, crap. This is waiting room number 2. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 looks away from him, brushing him off. Apparently that pissed Deku off and he walks further into the room. Alright, so I may have walked into the wrong room, but don't think that means I'm not gonna be on top of my game. You got that, he declares, firing off many explosions as he hits the table 𝗧𝗪𝗧's looking at. You better bring all you've got to this icy hot. Midoriya. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 mumbles. He said the same thing. He lifts his left hand up, closer to his face. That fool. Instead of trying to win the match, he focused on breaking my walls. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 looks over at Deku, asking, you guys used to be childhood friends, right? Was he like that when you were kids? So helpful. He trails off. What does he have to do with any of this? Deku hisses. He kicks the table away in annoyance. It's all between you and me now. Focus on the match. That's the only thing I give a damn about. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 frowns and watches Deku leave. His thoughts trail back to Midoriya and he sighs. He looks down at his left hand once more. He has a lot to think about. Toshinori stares at his student, a heavy feeling weighing down his shoulders. He can hear Midoriya's quiet groans of pain. Both of his arms are bandaged in casts. His right arm's shattered. This won't be easy to set back to normal. First I'll have to remove the bone splinters from his joints. Healing comes after. Recovery girl sighs, her eyes drifting over Midoriya's form. This boy admires you so much he's willing to destroy himself. You lit that fire. You moved him to this. I don't like it. Not one bit. You're overdoing it, both you and this boy. Recovery girl gives him a pointed glare. You'd better not praise him for it, she says. Midoriya-kun, Midoriya-chan, Deku-kun. Toshinori jumps, startled by the door slamming open as Uraraka, Iida, and Asui enter the infirmary. Midoriya blinks a bit as he looks at his friends. Guys, the next match, he mumbles. The arena was mostly destroyed, so there's a break while it's being repaired. Iida explains. We came because we were worried. You and Todoroki really went all out. Uraraka adds, worry shining in her eyes. Asui nods her head in agreement. Pipe down. It's fine to worry, but he's about to have surgery. Recovery girl exclaims, trying to shoosh them out of the room. Surgery? The boy's friends exclaim. Toshinori can't help his small smile. The kid has good friends. I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. Midoriya whimpers. Toshinori looks over at him, frowning. He knew that the boy was talking about the conversation they had before the sports festival. I want you to tell the world that you are here. The unspoken words put more weight on Toshinori's shoulders. Maybe if I'd just shut up. But I had to say what I did to Todoroki-kun. I couldn't let him keep hurting himself like that. Neither of them noticed that the others in the room were listening in. You were trying to bring it out of him, Toshinori says. Izuku nods, and how selfless can this boy be? His glare, it just didn't suit him. His face screamed that he was hurting, but he was trying to keep everyone away from him. It was just too sad. I thought maybe I should just mind my own business. But I had to, because at that point I couldn't take it anymore. It was just so frustrating. Toshinori looks away, unable to bear seeing Midoriya like this. I forgot why I was there. I lost myself. I'm sorry. He apologizes, and Toshinori feels like the boy is waiting to be scolded. His body language screams it. An unfortunate outcome, indeed, and calling you a fool won't change what happened. He sees Midoriya wince. However, giving help that's not asked for is part of what makes a true hero, Toshinori says. Izuku stares at his now crooked right hand. Recovery girl looks at him. Let that damaged right hand of yours serve as a reminder, she says. And I refuse to heal this sort of injury from now on. Enough with this self-destruction. Find another way for the boy to manage. She orders, sighing. Izuku stands up from the bed he was sitting on and leaves, planning on going back to watch the rest of the matches. All Might trails behind him as he thinks about how he's been using his quirk. Another way, huh? All Might mumbles. All Might, you originally became a teacher at UA. To find a successor, right? Everyone's fighting with all they've got here. They're unrelenting spirits. I can feel how strong they all are. So I'm thinking that maybe I should find someone else to replace you. Is that it? All Might asks him, making Izuku wince and nod. It's true, the students here are all exemplary heroes in the making. One for all is a lattice of power. If someone with a pre-existing quirk like young Todoroki were to inherit it, he would become an undeniable superhero with super strength on top of his fire and ice powers. Well, then Izuku tries to say that maybe he should give the quirk to someone like Todoroki, someone more deserving of it. But I see no need. All Might interrupts. You're already exceeded my expectations more times than I can count, young Midoriya. In my heart, I believe that there's something special in you and you alone, my boy. I know you may think of otherwise, but your match with young Todoroki proves my point. You are willing to forfeit the match in order to save him from himself. All Might smiles at him, patting his head. Izuku immediately feels the warmth radiating from the man. I'm extremely proud of you, kid. Though next time, try not to break your arms, okay? The hero jokes. I'm sorry. Izuku apologizes, lowering his head. He hears All Might chuckle. There's nothing to apologize for, kid. He replies, come on, let's go watch the rest of the matches. All Might suggests, slinging an arm across Izuku's shoulders. Izuku feels himself tense, not used to the contact. If All Might notices him tense up, he doesn't say anything. They continue walking in silence before it's broken. You know, I was born quirkless too. Izuku's eyes widen and he looks up at his mentor. Being quirkless was also rare back in my day, though not as rare as it is now. My teacher, my predecessor, actually possessed a quirk, but she still believed in me and took me under her wing. Izuku stops walking and he looks at All Might. Why didn't you ever tell me this? All Might laughs. You never asked, although I was expecting it. So, you were quirkless too? Izuku exclaims. Sure was, kid. Let's hurry and get back to watch the rest. Izuku gets back in the middle of Bakugo and Kirishima's fight. He sits down beside Ida, smiling at his friend. Midoriya-kun, the boy exclaims, catching Uraraka's attention. Deku-kun, you're all right, she cries in relief. I'm glad to see your surgery was a success. Ida exclaims once more. Izuku smiles a bit, nodding. Right, thanks, he says. I'm sorry I missed your fight against Shiozaki-san. Ida-kun, did you win? He asks. He sure did. He was so fast I could barely follow him. Uraraka exclaims. Well, I knew my mobility wouldn't mean much in the fight, so I used my reciproburst and threw her from the ring as soon as the match started. Ida explains. That makes sense. I don't think anyone's mobility would have mattered against Shiozaki-san's vines. I think at one point it definitely would have come down to speed, maybe strength too. Sorry, I'm rambling. Izuku apologizes, glad he stopped himself before he could ramble for too long. Both Uraraka and Ida laughed. Izuku then looks at Ida. Do you know if your brother has been watching you? He asks, thinking back to the conversation he and Uraraka had with Ida. He had told them about how he was the younger brother of Ingenium. Izuku remembers gushing about how amazing Ingenium was. He called me earlier, but he was busy with work. Ida explains. I'm actually glad though. Even after coming this far, I still can't say I'm number one yet. He says, and Izuku understands. Ida wants to prove himself to his brother, and Izuku knows the feeling. Suddenly the crowd erupts in cheer, and the conversation between Izuku and Ida stops. They watch as Bakugo takes out Kirishima. Ida stands from his seat saying, Here I go. Good luck, Ida-kun. Uraraka and Izuku exclaim as the boy walks away. The next match is Ida versus Todoroki. Izuku watches the two, wondering how Todoroki will handle himself. Would he use his left side? In the end, he didn't. He won by freezing the exhaust pipes in one of Ida's legs. After, Todoroki froze Ida entirely and stopped him from moving. Izuku made sure to tell Ida he did a good job. The class rep gave him a small smile in response and was called away, telling Izuku and Uraraka that his mother was calling him. For some reason, Izuku had a bad feeling in his gut. He hoped for Ida's sake that his feeling was just a ruse. Ida doesn't come back when the final match begins. Bakugo charges in, going straight for Todoroki. It seems he's trying to get him to use his left side. Izuku watches the fight, analyzing the two. Who do you think will win, Deku-kun? Uraraka asks. Izuku glances over to her. Bakugo, probably. He replies. Todoroki-kun is getting worn out. If you're not looking for it, you won't see how his attacks are getting slower like they did when I was fighting against him. There's also a factor of his fire quirk. During our match he probably used up a lot of energy with that burst of fire, seeing as how out of control it was. It doesn't look like he's going to use it again for this match, no matter how much Bakugo eggs him on. If Bakugo keeps charging him without giving Todoroki-kun a chance to breathe, he'll most likely win. Izuku explains. Uraraka stares at him with wide eyes, surprised by his observations. Wow, Deku-kun, I kinda forgot how analytical you are. She laughs lightly, rubbing the back of her head. It really is amazing. Izuku smiles bashfully at the compliment and the two turn their attention back to the match. The match goes on and at one point, Izuku finds himself yelling out to Todoroki. He yells encouragement and hopes it'll push the other boy on. Moments like this make Izuku think that he's finally a part of something real. He's a part of a team, and everyone on that team is trying their hardest to succeed. They're all working toward the same goal and Izuku feels a warmth in his chest at the thought. Am I really a part of all of this though? He asks himself. The only reason I'm here is because this is where my father wanted to put me. I'm only here because he gained something from this. Did Izuku even belong here? Looks like you were right, Deku-kun. Uraraka's voice breaks him from his thoughts. Huh? He asks, looking at her. Uraraka glances at him and points a finger to the arena. Bakugo-kun won, just like you thought. Your analysis was spot on, she says. There's a feeling of disgust that runs through him when she says that. The sports festival is quickly wrapped up after the final match. All Might awards the victors of the festival with a bright smile and a shining gold medal. Bakugo seems to refuse his win, and his violent outbursts results in him being chained up. He even goes as far as to yell angrily at All Might as he tries to put the medal on him. In the end, the medal hangs from Bakugo's mouth as he growls. After everything is over, Izuku heads out of the school once everyone is dismissed. He's wearing his normal school uniform now, the straps of his bag over his shoulders. He mumbles to himself about texting his father to let him know he was coming home. Midoriya, a voice says, and he stops in his tracks. Izuku turns around to look at the person who called his name and sees Todoroki. Oh, Todoroki-kun, he greets. The boy nods in response. The two stand there for a few minutes, neither knowing what to do or say. Izuku guesses he isn't the only one who's bad at talking to people. He observes the boy in front of him and watches as Todoroki seems to fumble over unspoken words. He tries to say something, but stops himself. Izuku stands patiently and waits for Todoroki's inner battle to be over. I'm not sure why you tried to help me during our match. Todoroki finally begins. But you were right. I was being stubborn. Thank you, he says, and Izuku notices his eyes drift toward his bandaged hand. Your hand, he mumbles. Oh, this? Izuku asks, holding his right hand. It's all right. Recovery girl fixed it for me. It wasn't injured too badly, he exclaims, trying to ease Todoroki's guilt. He could see the guilt in the boy's eyes. Uraraka mentioned you needed surgery, Todoroki said bluntly, and Izuku inwardly winces. It's okay, really. It was a result of my own recklessness, so I brought it upon myself, he hurriedly explains, waving his hands dismissively. Todoroki frowns but doesn't say anything else. Izuku notices him lingering and once more, he waits. When Todoroki doesn't say anything, Izuku looks around, trying to look at anything but the boy in front of him. Are you taking the train? He asks, rubbing his hands together nervously. Yeah, Todoroki replies. Izuku's smile is small as he offers, do you want to go there together then? Todoroki nods and the two of them head to the station together, talking quietly, but with tiny smiles on their faces. The bar he stands in is quiet, the only occupants of the building being the other villains he's surrounded by. A man sits in a chair in front of him, a large hand covering his face. Beside him is a man made of black mist, hands hanging by his sides. Sitting around the bar are a few others, but he doesn't care to pay attention to them. He looks at the man, smirking a bit. I get it. He begins, you're the ones who attacked Ua and you want me to join your little gang, right? He asks. To be honest, the last thing he expected when the Mist Man portrayed him here was an invitation to join a group of villains. Yeah, exactly. When it comes to being evil, you're a pro, Handman says. And what are you after? Handman tilts his head to the side, as if he were thinking. Well, we want to kill All Might, eventually. But I also want to destroy everything I don't like. He dryly chuckles, narrowing his eyes at Handman. It's ridiculous that you really had my interest for a second. You're the type I hate the most. He pulls at the blades hanging on his sides as if I'd team up with some temper tantrum throwing child. Bloodlust without conviction is meaningless, Izuku mumbles to himself as he stares at the destroyed microwave in front of him. For the past week, he's been staying with Gran Torino, the same man that helped mentor All Might, as part of his internship. Aizawa had explained to them that pros use the sports festival to scout for interns. Surprisingly, Izuku had gotten a lot of offers for his 2 weeks of experience. All Might suggested learning from Gran Torino since the man had a lot of experience with One for All. Izuku ended up following his mentor's suggestion and went to Gran Torino's. He's only been there for a few days and the man had already helped him immensely. With One for All, Izuku is able to channel the power throughout his body without being too slow or stiff. In the past, Izuku usually centralized the power to one part of his body, which resulted in more damage being done to that part. Especially after the sports festival, Izuku needed a better way to use his quirk. Thankfully, Gran Torino offered him some advice and he was able to figure out how to distribute the quirk evenly to his body. The one thing that confuses him, however, is that his respect for All Might is shackling him. He didn't know how to interpret it. Izuku peeks over at Gran Torino, making sure he's sleeping. When he sees it's all clear, he makes his way to the door. He quietly opens it and pokes his head out, glancing around. When he sees the coast is clear, he heads to the alleyway by the house. Ever since he figured out how to channel the power throughout his body, he's been practicing putting the idea into use. He stops at the entrance and looks up at the two walls of the building. I can probably jump between these walls with 5 or 8%. That should be enough. He mumbles, "This'll be so cool if I can manage to do it." Izuku squats down, powering his quirk in his legs and jumps. He throws his arms up and sees the wall growing closer to him. I have to land carefully, brace my arms maybe. I have to. He's cut off as he face plants into the wall. Izuku groans in pain as he lands in a pile of trash bags. Gotta brace my legs, and I need cushions for my arms. He mumbles as he stares up at the night sky. Starting with the second jump, I need to power up both arms and legs. But with that instant boost, there's the danger of breaking my limbs. Seems there just isn't time for the whole visualization thing. Okay, one more time. He continues rambling as he pushes himself up from the bags. Okay, let's try this again. Izuku groans as he lands upside down against the wall. Gran Torino stands above him, arms crossed. Keep fighting against nothing but my old tactics, and you'll develop some bad habits. The man says. They were doing some training, and had been going at it since 10. It's currently 5 in the evening. Forget habits. I'm barely used to this at all. Let's keep going. Izuku pleads. No, that's enough. Gran Torino refutes, putting a hand on his chin as he grins. Time for Phase 2, the actual internship. Izuku's face lights up and he rolls over so that he can properly sit up. Really? He exclaims. Go put on your hero costume and we'll head out. Izuku blinks but does as he's told. He quickly puts on his hero costume and follows Gran Torino out the door. We'll be hunting down villains. The man explains. What? Already? Izuku exclaims in disbelief. Like I said, fighting only me will leave you ill-prepared to deal with other types of opponents. In this phase, you'll pit yourself against all different sorts of villains for experience. Izuku puts a hand on his chest, already feeling his heart pound nervously. I get what you're saying, but I don't think my heart's quite ready for this. He mumbles. Gran Torino stops walking to turn back and look at him. But you've already fought villains, haven't you? This won't even come close to how bad that was. Where we're going, crime rate is low. The denser the population, the more trouble there is. So in place like Shibuya, minor crimes are a dime a dozen. Gran Torino calls a taxi and they approach it, climbing inside. Shibuya? No way. I'm gonna walk around that classy neighborhood in costume. Izuku says in surprise as he sits down. You only get to wear it because you're with me, a hero. Just be glad you're gonna get to strut your stuff in public. Gran Torino exclaims, giving him a pointed look. Izuku nervously chuckles in reply and that's the end of that. He turns his attention to outside as they drive. If we're heading to Shibuya, that means we'll pass by Hosu. He frowns slightly, wondering how Ida was holding up. Maybe I'll get in touch with him later. The hero killer, Stain, stands over Hosu, eyeing down the city. Shigaraki stands behind him. Livelier than I thought. Shigaraki comments, I will reform this town, but for that, more sacrifices are needed. Stain raises his arms up. Hero is a title reserved for those who perform truly great feats. Too many are undeserving. Just money worshippers playing hero. Until this society wakes up and corrects itself, I will continue my work. Unbeknownst to Stain, Shigaraki has plans of his own. I'll crush your pride and dignity, Stain. Izuku looks unsurely over at Gran Torino. Is it okay that we're getting in at night? He asks. Night's perfect. Gran Torino replies easily. There are sure to be more incidents now. It'll be fun. He adds. Izuku winces slightly. I don't know about fun, but I hear you. He mumbles as he leans back into his seat. He then pulls out his phone, going onto his and Ida's chat. He barely recognizes Gran Torino talking to him. He read it, but still no reply. Even though Ida-kun always replies within 3 minutes of reading a text. I'm really worried about him. He sighs quietly as he turns his attention back to the window. He takes note of a loud boom. and he suddenly flies forward as the train skids to a rushed stop. Passengers, please remain seated. We're making an emergency stop. A sudden crash booms through the train car and Izuku sees a hero come flying in, smoke and debris following. Izuku's eyes widen as he spots a creature standing in the new hole in the wall of the train. A 𝗵𝗃. Does that mean Shigaraki is up to something? He thinks as people begin to panic. Gran Torino is the first to act, flying toward the 𝗵𝗃, pushing it out of the train. Stay there, kid. The man shouts. Izuku runs to the hole, staring at the city before him. There was smoke almost everywhere. There were multiple explosions followed by explosions. What the hell is happening? If this is because of Shigaraki, what could he be planning? Wait, Ida-kun is in Hasu. He takes off before he can properly think, ignoring the protests of the train conductor. Using one for all to give himself a small boost, he tries to get to the city as fast as possible. The streets are crowded with civilians screaming and running. Izuku tries his best to push past them, knocking into a few people here and there. They're all running from the center of the commotion. That guy on the train was most definitely a 𝗵𝗃. If it's as powerful as the one back at the U.S.J, then not just Gran Torino, but the whole city is in trouble. Think, Izuku, think. What's the best course of action? He halts his sprint as he sees multiple heroes facing off against a lot of 𝗵𝗃. Tenya-kun, where are you? A hero shouts, catching Izuku's attention. How could he run off at a time like this? He's Ida-lin's mentor. Izuku notes. He looks at the 𝗵𝗃 surrounding everyone and forces himself to think. There's no way, I can't figure it out. What's going on? He yelps as a hero pushes him aside, instructing him to get to safety. Think, Ida-kun ran off somewhere. The always super serious class rep Ida-kun. There's no way that can't be coincidental with all of this trouble. Hasu, the 𝗵𝗃, Ida-kun. Hasu. Izuku's eyes widen when he finally makes the connection. He can hear his heart pounding his ears. Hero killer. With his heart still pounding, he spins on his heels and takes off. He prays he makes it in time. I might be overthinking this, and it's not like I have much proof, but that's exactly why I have to take action here. In the same city where the hero killer appeared, we've got 𝗵𝗃s rampaging around. I may be the only one in the whole city uneasy about the potential connection. The League of Villains and the hero killer. Could they be working together? Izuku uses as much of his quirk as he can without breaking his limbs. If they are working together, it probably means the hero killer is somewhere around here right now. If Ida-kun ran off somewhere, does that mean he's found the hero killer? He runs past an alleyway and that's when he spots them. He sees Ida laying on the ground and suddenly he's jumping between the walls and powering his quirk through his fist. Bingo! Izuku skids to a stop, standing in front of Ida. Midoriya-kun, his classmate exclaims. But why? It was on TV. How 60% of the hero killer's victims were discovered around blind corners in deserted areas. So I've been scouring the back alleys near the normal hero agency, close to the center of all the trouble. Looking for you. Izuku steps back toward Ida. Can you move? Make for the main road and get some pros to come help us. He hears Ida grunt. I can't move. He cut me. That's most likely his quirk. Izuku winces a bit. They were talking about that. So he needs to cut you to get it to work. His eyes trail over to another slouched body against the wall. Another one. If it was just Ida-kun I might have been able to carry him and run, but Midoriya-kun, don't interfere. This has nothing to do with you. Izuku can't see the look on Ida's face, but he can hear the anguish in his voice. Sorry to break it to you, Ida-kun, but this has everything to do with me because you're involved. Friends don't leave other friends to deal with their problems alone. I think at least. A friend shows up and says I'm here to save you. A good line for sure, but it's my duty to kill these two, and if we're forced to fight then naturally, the weaker of us will be culled. So, what now? The look on Stain's face makes Izuku shudder. He's reminded of the look his father gave him the day after the U.S.J attack. He can tell Stain is more than the other villains he's faced. Stain had conviction, something someone like Shigaraki lacked, even with just a hunch and no proof. I should have persuaded some pros to come with me. Now I need to protect those two that are down. Maybe I can buy some time. He thinks as he sends a message on his phone before slipping it back into his pocket on his belt. Or, drive off the hero killer all by myself. Would I even be able to? Izuku gives a small smirk, one full of confidence. What is it with me and murderous villains lately? He quips. I thought by now my fight or flight instincts would have forced me to do the exact opposite of what I'm about to do. But here we are. No, I told you to run. This is none of your business. Izuku fought back the small part of him that wanted to roll his eyes. Did Ida not understand what he said before? He guesses he'll just have to make him understand. What's a hero supposed to do when you say crap like that? Izuku asks, clenching a fist. I've got a lot to say to you, but I suppose that'll have to wait. I can't scold you and fight at the same time. He jokes. Besides, it's like All Might said, he puts his fists up, ready to fight. Giving help that's not asked for is what makes a true hero. The look on Stain's face is pure insanity. Izuku breaks out into a run, dashing for Stain. The hero killer brandishes his sword to attack. One for all. Full cowling. He dips down, powered by his quirk. This'll probably be my one chance to get close. Watch out. Ada shouts, if he cuts you. This is perfect. Izuku zooms past Stain and leaps off the ground, readying a punch just as Stain whips around, sword in hand. 5%. Detroit smash. His hit lands on Stain's head and Izuku lands on all fours, looking up immediately to see if his attack worked. He saw Stain's head duck down and he grinned a bit. My full cowling works. I can fight. Izuku's body feels heavy as he suddenly tumbles to the ground. I can't. Did he graze me? He looks over himself best he can and he sees a small tear in his sleeve. A scratch I can't even feel is somehow enough. He looks up at Stain and sees the blood on his knife. It's the blood. You lack power, but you did track my movements. You exploited my blind spot and planned to bring me down. That's how you moved. So many fools out there are nothing but talk. But you are worth keeping alive. Unlike these others. Stain walks back to Ida and Izuku scrunches his eyes shut in frustration. He's wrong. I'm not, especially since I'm the least genuine hero of all. What good am I if I can't even protect my friends? He hears a grunt and feels an intense heat. His eyes open and he stares in surprise. Midoriya, learn how to write more specific directions. I was almost late. Standing at the entrance of the alley was Todoroki. Izuku feels relief seeing his classmate there, but he looks at Todoroki in wonder. But how'd you? Your flames. How? That's my line. It took me a few seconds to figure it out. He begins, ice cracking beneath his foot. That group text to everyone with nothing but your location. Sending a totally meaningless message isn't your style. I realized it meant I'm in trouble. Help. His ice creates a small ramp and it sends both Izuku and the injured hero toward Todoroki and away from the fight. Don't worry. In just a few more minutes the pros will be here. Todoroki uses his flames to attack Stain. Todoroki-kun, don't let him draw blood. I'm pretty sure he paralyzes opponents by ingesting their blood. That's how he got us. Izuku warns, explains all the blades, so I've just gotta keep my distance. Just as he finishes speaking, a knife is chucked at him, cutting his cheek. You've got some good friends. Ingenium. Izuku watches as Todoroki and Stain fight, feeling a knot of worry in his stomach. Why? Izuku looks over at Ida. Both of you, just stop it. I've inherited my brother's name. I have to do this. He's mine to inherited his name. That's weird. Todoroki cuts in. Because the Ingenium I know never made faces like that. Guess your family's also got a dark side to it. Izuku hears the two speaking but doesn't focus on it. He groans as he struggles to move. He needs to help. He can't be laying on the ground paralyzed. Todoroki-kun. He feels his fingers twitch and his eyes widen. His ability to move finally comes back to him as Stain slashes through Todoroki's ice and he leaps into the air. Izuku meets him there, grabbing his scarf and dragging him across the wall. Midoriya. Todoroki shouts, somehow I can move again just fine. He replies as Stain elbows his side. Izuku yelps and lets go of Stain, allowing the villain to throw Izuku off of him. Izuku grunts as he lands a few feet away from Todoroki. Get back, Midoriya. Todoroki commands, creating ice to block off Stain. Izuku coughs as he stands. So he tasted our blood and paralyzed us, but I was the first to break free. I can think of 3 possible explanations. Either the effect is weaker the more people he uses it on, or it's about how much blood he gets, or its effectiveness depends on blood type. Blood type. And be the pro mumbles. And I'm a. Ida adds. Blood type. That's right. Stain confirms. Izuku straightens up a bit. Thought it's not like knowing that'll really help us. He says, frowning. We need to hurry and get these two out of here. He's quick enough to react to both my fire and ice, so I'm not seeing an opening. Until the pros get here, our best hope is to keep him at bay and keep dodging. Izuku nods in agreement, powering up one for all. You've got too much exposed blood, Todoroki-kun. I'll draw his attention while you provide rear support. Sounds like a pretty risky plan, but I trust you. The two of us will protect them. 2 on 1 at least you're not naive. Izuku jumps, directly fighting Stain while Todoroki provided backup with his flames and ice. Their fighting mostly consists of Izuku dodging blades and trying to land punches where he can. Todoroki aids with his fire mostly, knowing it'll do more damage. Both of them are slightly surprised when they hear Ida speak. Stop it. I can't take it. I can't watch you two shed blood for me. Ida shouts. If you want to stop this, then stand up. Todoroki shouts in response. Izuku flips around Stain's sword. Stop wallowing in revenge and help us, he adds. He yells out as Stain makes a large gash on his arm to the point that it hurts to move it. His eyes widen when he sees Stain heading for his classmate. Shit, Todoroki-kun, look out. Be the hero he wanted you to be, Todoroki exclaims, using his flames to make Stain dodge instead of doing a head-on attack. Stain's attack wasn't halted though, for his blade was in front of Todoroki's face. Damn it. A blur zoomed past him and suddenly Ida was there, breaking Stain's blade. He then kicks Stain away from Todoroki. Izuku brightens up from where he was leaning against the wall for support. Ida-kun. So the effect faded. Bastard's quirk ended up being no big deal, surprisingly. Todoroki mutters. For wrapping you two up in something you have nothing to do with. I truly apologize. Again with that, Izuku murmured. And that's why I cannot allow you two to spill any more blood. From there, Ida and Todoroki worked together to try to take down Stain. Izuku hadn't realized, but he had been paralyzed again when Stain cut his arm. Izuku watches as Ida holds his arm out in front of Todoroki, the knife cutting his arm instead of hitting his classmate. Izuku forces himself to try to move again, hoping the effects of the villain's quirk wouldn't last long. While Todoroki and Ida were fighting Stain, he was antsy. He has to help too. When he can move again, he stands up, ready to fight. Round 2. He moves his arm but cries out in pain when he does. It hurts too much to move it. How am I going to be able to fight then? I normally use my arms for my punches. It'd be too much to focus on one arm only for attacking. His eyes drift over to Todoroki just as his classmate slams his foot down, creating a ramp of ice as he uses his other hand to freeze up Ida's engines. That's it. I can use my legs, he thinks. Todoroki-kun, he calls as he and Ida leap into the air. Todoroki looks up at him as he gives the boy a grin. Thanks for the idea, Izuku calls as he lands a kick on Stain's face as Ida hits his chest. They both easily land on the ground near Todoroki and the pro. Stain lands a few feet away from them, out cold. After they defeat Stain, the pros arrive. They're taken by surprise to see Stain was defeated by children, but they quickly take control of the situation. Todoroki takes it upon himself to carry Izuku on his back, much to the boy's chagrin. Izuku mumbles apologies and Todoroki waves him off. They follow the pros to where the cops and ambulance are. They run into Manuel and Gran Torino on the way and Izuku winces as his mentor scolds him for not following directions. Before Izuku can respond, a Namu flies overhead and grabs him. He hears everyone shouting but it's muffled by the sound of the wind ringing in his ears. Within a few seconds he's grabbed from the Namu and pressed into the ground. He hears Stain's voice as he speaks and he feels a chill in the air. His body tenses and he swears he recognizes the feeling. A realization dawns on him and 𝗧𝗵𝗲, he whispers. His voice is laced with fear. Everything goes quiet suddenly and the chill disappears. He's too focused on the chill of the feeling to pay attention to what happens. Midoriya, Todoroki exclaims, running to him. He helps Izuku up and Izuku hopes he doesn't notice how tense he is. Midoriya, he hears Todoroki ask, but Izuku can't find it within himself to reply right away. I am alright, I think, Izuku replies eventually, as Todoroki lets him lean against him. That overwhelming sense of power and conviction. I've felt that before. From my father, he explains, not realizing what he said. Your father, Todoroki mumbles in confusion. The others come over to them, effectively stopping Izuku from explaining himself. With that, Izuku, Todoroki, and Ida are hauled off to the hospital to treat their wounds while Stain was taken to jail. No one will know of what truly happened except those involved. To the public, it'll be known that Endeavor took down the hero killer. Izuku and his classmates won't be reprimanded for their actions as a result, but that doesn't stop Izuku from worrying. For the second time in his life, he can't help but wonder just who was his father.